There's only one man in all of Westeros whom he could be referring to. And he's here in this room, standing in front of me, Harold immediately realized. Prince Oberyn, you want Robb to crown himself king when he has no right to it nor desire for it? Harold asked. I never ever would want to be king. I fucking hate King's Landing and I hate the lickspittles and cowards of the court there. Prince Oberyn, I have no interest in being king, said Robb. You see, that's why you should be king. You don't want to out of honor and duty, two of the words of your mother's house. But, as I already said, the other contenders to be king are all unsuitable. If it came to battle, Renly would have Loras lead all the battles rather than the likes of Randall Tarly or Paxter Redwyne, the best warriors of the Reach. Ever since the war started, you have proven yourself a good leader and a great warrior. You have been merciful and just, hardy and strong. Lord Stark, you have all the makings of a great king. One who can bring peace, order, but most of all, stability. Right now, you are the talk of Westeros. The young wolf who tricked the mighty Tywin Lannister, who crushed two great Lannister armies and did not needlessly slaughter their wounded. You saved the Riverlands from total destruction at the hands of Tywin Lannister and liberated nearly all of it from the clutches of the Lannisters, barring Harrenhal. If you declared yourself king, many men from all kingdoms would gladly follow you to King's Landing to kill Joffrey and take the Iron Throne. Arianne 9. Please accept, Robb. You are the only good and great man who deserves to be king of the Seven Kingdoms, Arianne thought as her uncle finished his speech and watched as Robb thought this over. He turned to face his friends. Gendry looks so much bigger and stronger now. He truly is a Baratheon, Robert's bastard obviously. Both Renly and Stannis are incapable of having bastards, for different reasons of course. Robb, Gendry, Harold and Theon Greyjoy all have the looks of warriors. Not at all like boys and childish men who have fought in a few tourneys and unhorsed a few fellow knights and think themselves invincible. They are men who have fought in battles and risked their lives and limbs against men doing the same. She saw the same look when as a child, she saw relatives return to Dorne from fighting in Robert's rebellion. It's as he said, Robb. If those three kings are our only options, I'd much sooner fight alongside you for you to be crowned king. Better you than either of my uncles or the evil son of my father's brother fucking whore of a wife, said Gendry. Yes, he's definitely the bastard of Robert Baratheon. Robb. I've said time and time again that Joffrey is a fucking tyrant and that both Renly and Stannis would make shite kings. And they will. But you won't. You know enough about the Game of Thrones to know how to play it, but you also are just and wise and ready to do all that you can for all peoples of Westeros, in spite of any differences, just as Uncle Jon taught us, said Harold. I'm with you, no matter what you decide, Robb. You know that, said Theon. Finally, Robb turned to face Arianne. What do you think, Ari? Uncle Oberyn is looking at me. Don't look at me like that when Robb is asking me this, she thought when she could see her uncle's cognizant grin at Robb calling her Ari. Robb, I know that you don't want to be king. But, you're the only good man worthy of being king, she said. Robb briefly looked outside at the sunset. He took a deep breath before turning to face Uncle Oberyn. Very well. If that's what the realm needs. I'll make the announcement at Riverrun, with all lords of the North, Riverlands, Vale and Dorne in attendance. And then we renew our plans with the war, said Robb. Arianne felt her heart flutter madly at hearing him say those words. You've changed so much since the last time I saw you. Excellent. But there is one last thing. For such a king, you must have a queen, said Uncle Oberyn. Whom did you have in mind? And at that, Uncle Oberyn gestured to Arianne. This is it. Robb and I will be wed. Ari. Yes, said Uncle Oberyn. Arianne looked into his eyes as he looked at her. He looks afraid at the thought of being king. But he looks at me with love, she thought with a smile. Robb finally nodded, a loving smile on his face. Arianne could feel her eyes moisten, as well as between her legs. Gods, why have I been fucking men and women left and right all of my life, when I could have been with Robb? When will our king and queen get married? Gendry asked, breaking the silence. We have 2 weddings soon, in Riverrun. Between my uncle Edmure and Roslyn Frey, and between my sister and Lord Harold, Robb pointed out. Ariane noticed Harold looked nervous at the mention of him getting married. A triple wedding. I've heard of double weddings. Indeed, I've been to a few, and fucked both all brides and all the grooms, but never have I been to a triple wedding, said Uncle Oberyn. Well, I can quite assure you on this occasion that your bed would be cold on such a wedding day, Prince Oberyn Theon joked, at which Uncle Oberyn burst out laughing. Soon after the feast, Ariane went to the bedchambers that had been loaned to her. She went inside, feeling hot and nervous as she sat down and rested her back on her bed. She had seen him, for the first time in what, to her, felt like a lifetime. And now she was to marry him. The wedding will not take place for another moon. Why does it have to be so long away? I want to marry him now and for him to fuck me here and now. We'll marry and once the war is over, we'll be king and queen and we'll have many children and be happy for the rest of our lives, she fantasized as she imagined she and Robb as king and queen in the Red Keep's throne room. And then, she heard a knock on the door. Please be Robb, please be Robb. She climbed off the bed and walked to the door and opened it. It was Robb. Ari, he said, immediately holding her and hugging her. My handsome young wolf, she said as she took hold of his hands and kissed his ear and his neck. He broke from the hug and they kissed hard and he pushed her into the bedchamber and closed the door. Kissing him was unlike any other man or woman she had kissed. Kissing him made her feel alive, it made her feel happy and loved, like she had never felt before. She felt happier than she had ever felt in her life. They sat down on the bed and Robb said, I love you. Since that night before I left, I felt nothing but weak around you. I couldn't bring myself to want the betrothal to Myrcella because all I could think about was you. I love you so much that I don't want to be away from you ever again. Hearing him say these words made her head dizzy from emotion. She couldn't help but smile so heartfelt at him as her eyes began to moisten. Why do you have to be so romantic? I love you too. I spent so long imagining life with you and what we'd do together. And it all starts tonight, she said before kissing him again and gently pushing him down onto the bed and took off his northern furs and undid his tunic to see a great and muscled body beneath it, which only made her lust for him stronger. Gods, I really want you now. Wait, wait, he said, breaking from the kiss. What? She asked impatiently. We can't, not before the wedding. I don't want you to be carrying a child before the wedding, he replied as he held her hands. Robb, I've waited to see you again for nearly a whole year. Days and weeks of thinking about you and wanting you. I want you now, she said impatiently before unfastening the twines of her dress and pulling it off to let Robb see that all that she wore now was a copper bracelet of a snake wrapped around her bicep. That's right, enjoy what you didn't stare at when we first met. Enjoy what other men and women would kill for. Enjoy what only you are going to be tasting for the rest of our lives. The wedding is not for another moon, Robb. What matters is that we love each other, because I love you, so much. And even if we have a child tonight, it won't show during the wedding. So, let's have tonight and then look forward to the wedding, she said as she took hold of his hands and placed them on her tits. One after the other, he stuffed her nipples inside his mouth and bit both, and as she moaned, he finally took his breeches down. I love you so much, he said as he spread her legs. I want you so much, Robb, she wanted to say but couldn't as he grabbed her hips and Ariane looked at what his breeches had been hiding. Well now, that's a big bastard. Nothing else in the world mattered to Ariane as Robb thrust inside her, and with every thrust, she moaned louder and louder. Yes. Oh, Robb. You are an insatiable wolf, aren't you? Fuck. I'm hungry only for you, he said before he leant down to kiss and lick her nipples. Ariane pulled his head to hers before she kissed him again. Gods, your cock is so much bigger and better than any other I've ever had. As he got back up again, Ariane reached up and as he thrust harder into her, her nails dug into his back. Yes, Robb. Yes. Oh, gods, I want you, she nearly shouted before she pulled him back down and started to mount him. She at first didn't want people to hear her screams or his screams as she felt his cock inside her, but she was past caring. Only Robb mattered, Robb and his cock, which filled her like no other lover had ever filled her before. Eventually, after what felt like hours, they had at last stopped as Ariane rested in Robb's large arms. He had such enormous strength that he lifted her like she was a loaf of bread. I feel so safe and so happy in his arms. I don't want ever to leave bed again, as long he is here with me. No matter what happens tomorrow or next year, I will always be happy that you will be with me, Rob said as he held her and drifted to sleep. She kissed him on the lips and whispered, I love you, Rob. My handsome young wolf. My king. My love. Chapter 27, Chapter 25. Chapter text. Gendry 9. Ever since Gendry had defeated Amory Lorque and rescued both Harry on Karstark and Lord Meja Sewin, he had been well received by lords and knights in the armies of the North, the Riverlands, the Vale and Dawn. He was previously seen as a Baratheon bastard who didn't deserve the name of his father and was not worthy of it. But in proving his Stormhammer reputation with his father's monstrously sized hammer, he showed them all that he was worthy of his name and father's great hammer. But also, because he was now a legitimized bastard and had the name Baratheon, Gendry was approached by lords and ladies offering either their sons to be his squire or for their daughters to be betrothed to him. They only want their daughters to marry me or for their sons to be my squire because I'm a Baratheon and now I have a claim to Storm's End and to being the Lord Paramount the Stormlands. Gendry was no fool. He knew what they wanted. The first to offer him such a marriage was Lord Sewin, who offered his daughter Jonel's hand to Gendry for saving his life at the Battle of the Green Fork. To which Gendry replied, my lord, that would feel as though I only saved you for the Lady Jonel's hand. And he already had a good squire, Meryn, whom was becoming a better fighter, but many thought that a common-born bastard had no place being the squire of a knight with the great name of Baratheon and that he should have a high-born squire. I'm honored that you would keep me on as your squire, my lord, when there are high-born men who would make better squires, Meryn told him. Don't say that, Meryn. High-born they may be, but you've served me very well in the 6 moons that you've been in my service and I could never reward your loyalty or your hard work by just casting you aside in favor of a high-born boy, Gendry replied. When Oberyn Martell had suggested to Robb that he lay claim to the Iron Throne, Gendry, without hesitation thought, if he does lay claim, I would gladly side with him. He's a good man, a good lord and a great warrior. When he leads, he doesn't lead as though it is some dull lesson a maester taught him. He leads because it's in him to be a leader. He wouldn't be a king like my father. He would be both a great king and a good king. One who knew how to be a king in times of war and in times of peace. And that was why he said that he would gladly support Robb over his uncles. The morning after the Martells had made their case to Robb, Gendry woke up and went to the feast hall. As he sat down, he was tempted to eat and drink some of the leftover food and wine, but decided against it. I don't want to be a fat drunk like my father. And so, he just ate a few slices of bread and a couple of sausages until he saw Harold and Robb enter the feast hall. Both of them looked tired. Didn't you sleep well? He asked them both. Don't talk so loud, please, Harold moaned as he covered his eyes to block the sunlight from the window. Maybe I should get a hunting horn and blow it in your ears whenever you wake up from a drunken night, Gendry joked. Do that and I'll shove my lance up your ass. And you of all people should know that my aim with a lance is second to none, Harold groaned as he sat down. Not when you're pissed and it's a hot and sunny day. What about you, Robb? Did you drink a lot as well? Just a few cups, he replied, though Gendry noticed his hair was very messed up, and he smelled very different than what he usually smelled like. He usually smelled of sweat, steel and leather. But now he smelled of perfume and fancy oils. Was he with Orianne? A moon before their wedding. How was Orianne? Gendry asked. Robb looked at him with a stunned grimace. How did you know? He asked. You smell of her, Gendry replied with a knowing smirk. Fucking your betrothed a moon before your wedding. Robb, you naughty wolf. Did she make you howl all through the night? Harold said with a chuckle. More from you, and I'll howl like a wolf into your ears right now, Robb replied. What about you, Gendry? When will you get married? Now that lords are offering you their daughters' hands. It's like a repeat of when I was being made Lord of the Eyrie. Harold said as he turned to Gendry. All of the land that I have is a house in Storm's End. Not much for any children of mine to inherit, Gendry replied modestly. When he becomes king, Robb could award you Storm's End. I don't think either of your uncles would submit to Robb if he did become king, Harold pointed out. By the 7, how my life has changed since I became Harold's squire. First, I was a squire to a noble knight, then I became a knight, then a friend to the Lord of the Uri, then I've been legitimized and maybe, just maybe, I could be awarded Storm's End if the war would end in our favor and Robb is crowned King of Westeros. Robb, I'm heading off to Pike now, said Theon as he joined them. Be sure to find yourself a wife whilst you're there, Theon. The sheep around here have had enough. Harold said. Whilst Robb, Harold and Gendry laughed, Theon crept up behind Harold and slammed an empty tankard onto the table loud Lyle. To which he groaned and covered his ears with his hands whilst Theon, Robb and Gendry laughed. Good luck, Theon. It must be strange to go back home after such a long time, Gendry said as they shook hands after Theon had hugged Robb. It'll feel strange. But I'll be going back a warrior and not a green little maiden, Theon replied proudly. A maiden on the battlefield or a maiden in bed? Harold asked as they shook hands. Both. You're more likely to find summer snow in Dorne than to find a maiden unborn, Theon replied. Theon left and Robb led his own forces back to Riverrun, closely followed behind by the Dornish army. They arrived back in Riverrun a week after the arrival of the Dornish. And upon arrival, they saw Lady Stark and the knights she had left with and 4 people, 3 of whom Gendry didn't recognize, but he did recognize Captain Jory Castle. The exchange was successful. Jaime Lannister is back amongst the Lannister numbers then, and he will know now to not underestimate Robb, which will make them harder opponents to fight. Jory, Robb said, greeting the captain of the Stark household guards. My lord. I'm so sorry for all that has happened, he said as they shook hands. Robb greeted the 3 others, one of whom was a girl about his own age, if not younger, and was looking at Robb with a misty-eyed smile. Mother, thank you. Thank you, he said as he hugged Lady Stark and they whispered to each other, during which the both looked angry. Must be about Arya. I see that the Dornish have arrived, she said as they broke from their hug. That's something that we need to talk about, he said before nodding for Harold, Gendry, Sir Brynden Blackfish and Lord Edmure to join them. How is father? Lady Stark asked her brother. He's ill, more so than before, he said with a frown as they walked inside the Riverrun Solar. Where is Theon? Asked Sir Brynden. He's gone to try and bring his father and the Iron Islands to join us, said Robb, at which both Lady Stark and Sir Brynden looked particularly hesitant to the idea. So why is it that we are meeting in here? Lady Stark asked. Harold and Gendry looked to Robb and he said Prince Oberyn Martell is in command of the Dornish troops. And he said that whilst Dorne is grateful for what we gave them, they offer their army at a price. What price is that? Money. Sir Brynden asked. No. They want me to claim the Iron Throne for myself, he replied. What? Lady Stark asked. She turned to face Gendry and Harold. Gendry nodded in reply. Harold said that's not all he wanted, my lady. Prince Oberyn also wants Arianne Martell to be Robb's queen. She turned to face her son and asked, did you accept? Yes, he did, said an exotic voice. Prince Oberyn entered the Solar and said, Lady Stark, Lord Tully, Lord Blackfish, I think that you all can agree that Lord Stark would make a far better and more just and wiser king than the 3 claimants. Neither of these kings offer peace, order or stability to the realm. One is an evil little boy born from incest, another would be a puppet of the Tyrells and the Reach, and the last worships an evil faith that would eradicate all other faiths of Westeros. Prince Oberyn, do you realize how dangerous this would be for my son and for my family? Not only would he be making an enemy of the Lannisters, but both of Robert's brothers. Lady Stark demanded. We'll have more armies opposed to us rather than just the Lannisters. Stannis Baratheon's numbers are at best 5,000 and over 100 warships, whereas Renly's army numbers nearly 100,000 Stormlanders and Reachmen. Even with your army, Prince Oberyn, we number 65,000 if we don't call for reinforcements, said Sir Brynden. Mother, my lord uncles. I know that you think that this is suicide, I know that this makes it far more dangerous for us. And if I saw an alternative, I would have chosen it. But as far as I can see, there is none. And so, that is why I have agreed to Prince Oberyn's proposal, Robb said. What of Renly and Stannis? Edmure asked. They are more likely to fight each other than either us or the Lannisters. And by the time either Renly or Stannis is victorious, the winner will have suffered bad casualties and will be unlikely to be a serious threat, Harold said. And when will your wedding be to Princess Arianne? Lady Stark asked. At the same time as Uncle Edmure's wedding and Sansa and Harold's wedding, Robb suggested. Edmure looked unhappy with marrying a free girl. If all the stories I've heard about the Freys are true, I'm hoping to never ever marry one. I've already defeated several Freys in the melee at the Hands tourney in King's Landing. They weren't skilled fighters. I can still remember father laughing when I defeated 3 with just 1 blow. When will you announce your intentions to the lords? Asked Sir Brynden. Tonight. Gather all of them in the feast hall. I'll announce it then, said Robb. Robb, come with me, said his mother, and she went outside the solar with him before Edmure, Sir Brynden and Prince Oberyn followed behind. With only Gendry and Harold still inside the solar, Gendry turned to Harold. Have you heard from Sissy and Aelys? Gendry asked. I have. I miss my little Aelys. I love that little girl, and in Sissy's latest letter, she's growing up and has said her first word, Harold replied, looking sad at missing his bastard daughter, but happy that she was in good health. Have you decided what to do with Swordsong Castle? Gendry asked. As a matter of fact, I have. When Aelys has reached 12, I will legitimize her as a Hardang and make her the Lady of Swordsong, said Harold. Now that's generous for your bastard daughter. If only all highborn lords were this kind to their bastard children, Gendry thought. About time that the House of Hardang had its own seat and lands. But poor Aelys will be getting ravens from many lords and ladies the moment that she sets foot inside Swordsong. I hope you'll give her a good education for what is expected of her, Gendry said. She will get a good education. And I'll appoint wise and loyal advisors to her and make sure that she isn't pestered whilst she learns what it means to be a lady of her own castle, Harold replied. Robb returned 5 minutes later and asked Harold and Gendry for advice. What was it that your mother made? Gendry asked. She showed me my father's remains and told me that Jory will be taking them with him back to Winterfell, he said. As well as my father's remains, Jory will be taking the other hostages that the Lannisters captured back home to Winterfell. And then he'll come back with Sansa, in time for the 3 weddings, Robb continued. It's really happening now. I'm going to get married, said Harold. Sansa is the sweetest and most wonderful girl in the world, Harold. Whatever fears you may have about her and how she may treat Aelys, you are wrong. She will be kind to her, that I can promise you, Robb insisted. Harold nodded, and then Robb said, and now, I've just sent ravens to all of the north, to fortify in case of Ironborn raids. What? Do you not trust Theon? Asked Gendry. No, I do. He's like my brother. But it's his father I don't trust. My parents always told me that Balon Greyjoy is a very dangerous man who wants nothing more than to return to the old ways of the Iron Islands and to be a king. Mother reminded me of that just now. Though Theon may have a chance, but in case it doesn't work, I want the north to be fortified and garrisoned. Everywhere that can be used as a base. If they don't have a base, then they can't rest or supply themselves. Are you sure? The Ironborn are great warriors and can still launch a siege, Harold pointed out. You would think that. But whilst the Ironborn are great fighters, they are also lazy and prefer to raid and steal things that they can't build or grow themselves. They don't like sieges and they'd rather attack easy targets without too hard of a fight, said Robb. What about Moat Cailin? Harold asked, knowing that Moat Cailin, an impregnable but ruined fortress, controlled the only land entrance into the north, and with the Crannog men of Greywater Watch lurking in the swamps both sides of Moat Cailin to harass any foreign invader. I've sent a raven to Lord Reed to have his Crannog men patrol around there in silence and harry any Ironborn they find, if they come, Robb replied. And if the Ironborn do attack with a huge army? Gendry asked. I'll send Roose Bolton back to the north and he can muster 5,000 men from the Dread Fort if necessary and can call on Carhold, Last Hearth, Torrens Square and White Harbour to bring reinforcements if Balon Greyjoy leads the Iron Fleet to invade, Robb explained. If you had been king in the north when the Targaryens had turned their attentions to the north, they would have struggled even more to take the north than when they had struggled in Dorne, Harold complimented. So, what is it you wanted to talk to us about? Gendry asked. I need to come up with a good way to get the lords and ladies to back my claim, which is not ironclad other than people saying that I would make a better king than other claimants, Robb replied. Wait, the letter that Uncle Renly gave me. Do you still have the letter that Uncle Renly gave me to hand to you both? Gendry asked. Yes, I do, said Robb, his eyes opening wide when he realized what Gendry meant, and they ran to his bedchamber and retrieved it. This'll be perfect to show just how naive and idiotic Renly is. And there is nothing but plenty of facts to talk about Stannis and his Red Priestess and Joffrey and his evil nature, Harold pointed out. Well, this is it, Robb said, taking a few deep breaths as he looked at the letter. Then there was a knock on the door. Come in, said Robb. Lord Stark. A raven from Stannis Baratheon, said Maester Vimen, holding up a letter. Thank you, Maester Vimen, he said as he left. Robb read the letter before sighing through his nose and shaking his head. What does it say? Harold asked with an amused smile. He says to Robb Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. You command an army of nearly 50,000 and yet you have not declared for any king yet. You should know that your father supported my claim to the Iron Throne. I would hope that you would show the same dedication to justice, honor and duty as your father. The Iron Throne is mine, by rights, for you know by now of the truth of Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen's parentage. Join with me and together we can restore peace, order and honor to the realm, as Eddard Stark would have wanted. This great victory will be won with us united together and with the strength of the Lord of Light. Stannis Baratheon, the one true king of the Seven Kingdoms. I think Uncle Stannis has made it clear that he wants all of the realm to follow his religion of fire and sacrifices, Gendry pointed out. He has indeed. And there would be few who would keenly follow him, save for those who follow his religion. There are few who worship the old gods in the Riverlands and the rest of Westeros, whilst there are many who worship them in the north. But what Stannis and his Red Priestess want is for all septs and godswoods to burn. I would never let such a thing happen. All faiths should be tolerated and welcome in all of the Seven Kingdoms, Robb said with conviction. Robb X. Robb looked over the two letters and then thought over what he would say to the assembled lords and ladies of the North, the Riverlands, the Vale and Dorne. Never before in my life have I wanted to sit underneath a weirwood tree like father, and pray and just sit in silence and be far away from the chaos of the world. If I did become king, one of the first things I would do is plant heart tree saplings in the Kingswood and the gardens of the Red Keep. He walked inside the feast hall, was eating with Harold and Gendry and talking until it was after the main course. My lords and ladies, he shouted. There was still some talking until the great Jon powerfully shouted, fucking shut up. All of you. Thank you, Lord Umber. Now, ever since we first marched on the Riverlands to end Tywin Lannister's incursion, I have been asked a persisting question. Which king do we fight for? Well, it's clear that it won't be Joffrey, the evil mad boy who might just be the incarnate of the Mad King, which isn't surprising for those born of incest like the Targaryens. And, just before the battles at Green Fork, Darry and Riverrun, Sir Gendry Baratheon had delivered a letter from his uncle, Renly. In it he said before holding up the letter and reading out what it said, which caused great laughter in the hall. When you read it, it's almost as if he thinks that we marched to fight Tywin Lannister, simply so that he could take King's Landing and crown himself king. Not to save my father in King's Landing or to defend the Riverlands and save the people of the Riverlands at all, which caused more laughter. And tonight, only an hour ago, I received another letter. This one was from Stannis. He paused and then read out loud the letter. There was laughter but also anger at how the letter ended. It angers me that he would use my father as a way of trying to get me to join with him. But also, I think that Stannis makes it clear in the letter that if he did become king of the Seven Kingdoms, then he would burn all septs and godswoods and force all to follow this faith which is obsessed with fire and the sacrificing of innocent people. And at that there were loud cries of never, and angry uproars. Now, my good lords and ladies of the North, of the Riverlands, of the Vale and of Dorne, I was at a loss over who to support for a long time, he continued before pausing and taking a quick deep breath and continuing. But then, when our friends from Dorne arrived, Prince Oberyn Martell made it clear that Dorne would support none of these kings, but he did voice Sunspear's interest in seeing me crowned king. There was muttering and confusion across the hall and many looked at Prince Oberyn, unflinching and not claiming that he never said these words, he just sat and looked at Robb. Now, I was surprised, as many of you would be. I have previously made it clear that I have never wanted to be king. I still don't. I have no right to the Iron Throne at all. And I have made it clear that once we defeated Tywin Lannister and overthrew Joffrey, that a new and better king, one who is just and wise, would sit on the Iron Throne. Now this is an uneasy decision, my lords and ladies. So, I leave it to you. Whom should we call king? The great Yonumber was the first to stand up and said in a boisterous and powerful voice, my lords and ladies. I am a northerner and am proud of it. For a long time, I've thought that the north should stay out of the problems of the south. But no more. I have seen great lords come and go. And rarely have I seen any good or great kings. Renly and Stannis mean nothing to me. Why should they call themselves king when they act that all should follow them and that we owe them our loyalty and our swords? Why should either be king, when there is a war to fight, which we're all doing rather than they? I agree with Prince Oberyn. The only man in the Seven Kingdoms worthy of the Iron Throne, is here right now. King Robb, and he drew his giant sword and faced Robb and knelt down and pierced his sword into the floor. The next to stand was Uncle Ed Muir. When the armies of Tywin Lannister set foot into the Riverlands, we had sent calls for help to all of Westeros. Renly Baratheon had an army of 70,000 by then, growing by the day. Stannis had a growing army of less than 10,000. But neither of them came to help. But when all seemed lost and this great city seemed close to being conquered, it was my nephew, Robb Stark, who came to save us. And it was Harold Arryn who stopped the Mountain from further plundering the country and slaughtering my people. And so, I pledge my allegiance. King Robb, he said before kneeling and drawing his sword. Harold stood up next. Though people call us equals because we are both lords of our respective kingdoms, I have always seen Robb as the leader, and indeed, it was him who thought of the plan which saved the Riverlands from the absolute onslaught of Tywin Lannister. The other men and boys who call themselves king, mean little to me, for they've never defended the people they claim are their rightful subjects, even when they have the numbers to make a difference and end the war for good. And so, I swear my loyalty, to King Robb. And he drew his sword and knelt. King Robb, was shouted from the Great Yon once again, and soon all in the hall, Northerners, Rivermen, Valymen and Dornish drew their swords and pledged their allegiance. King Robb. King Robb. King Robb. King Robb. King Robb. Robb took a few deep breaths through his nose and glanced at his right, where he could his mother. She looked worried, but proud for her son. And then he glanced at his left, there was Arianne, who smiled lovingly at him. Robb raised both of his hands and the whole quietened down. And so, it shall be. In a few weeks from now, when my Lord Uncle Ed Muir is wed to Lady Roslyn Frey, and Lord Harold Arryn is wed to my sister, Lady Sansa, with the permission of Prince Oberyn, I shall wed his niece, Princess Arianne. There were claps and cheers at this announcement. By the old gods, am I sweating? I need a cold bath. Chapter 28, Chapter 26. Chapter text. Until you die. Brian of Tarth, Gwendoline Christie. Sir Brian of Tarth, a knight of King Renly Baratheon's Rainbow Guard, stood behind her king in the hall of Bitterbridge Castle, home of Lord Laurent Caswell of the Reach. Here his grace was being informed of the unexpected developments in the Riverlands. What? Robb Stark has laid claim to the Iron Throne, asked King Renly. My spies say that at a feast in Riverrun he asked whom he, his bannermen and allies should support to claim the Iron Throne. And they all chose Robb Stark as opposed to Stannis or you, your grace, said Lady Olenna Tyrell, whose network of spies had reach over all of the Seven Kingdoms. And the lords of the Riverlands and the Vale. Have they refused and deserted him, asked Mace Tyrell, sounding arrogant as he said it, as though they would have laughed at Robb Stark rather than support his claim. No, Mace. They all backed him, unanimously. And the Dornish back him also. Prince Oberyn Martell has joined Robb Stark with an army of 10,000 men, and Robb Stark has pledged to wed Arianne Martell, sternly said Lady Olenna with a raised eyebrow at her son. Robb Stark now has the backing of 4 kingdoms behind him, that's more than our king, Joffrey and Stannis all put together. But they can't have a great assembled army like his grace does. But even if we outnumber them, they will all be battle-hardened soldiers and knights. Why would the Dornish back him? Haven't they received our offers if they joined us, asked Father, Lord Selwyn of House Tarth. My spies say that they did, but it wasn't until Robb Stark presented his offer to them that they joined him, said Lady Olenna. Offer? I'm surprised that even the Dornish would join a barbaric northerner. But why would the Dornish do so after his grace offered them justice for Elia Martell and her children and a betrothal between a Martell girl and his grace's first son? Asked Mace Tyrell, as though he was astonished that the Dornish would turn the most generous of offers from his grace. Oh, be quiet, Mace. Robb Stark's offer was of greater benefit to Dorne. For Robb Stark literally gave them Amory Lorque and Gregor Clegane, alive and well, said Lady Olenna. No wonder the Dornish have put their support behind Robb Stark. But even so, King Renly is the right king to support. He has the popular support of the people and nobility and is a good man. He will be a great king and a good king. Hopefully Robb Stark, Hoster Tully, Harold Arryn and Doran Martell will see their mistake and put their backing behind him. He's the only king who can end the chaos erupted in Westeros right now. It's understandable that they would back Robb Stark, commented Randyll Tarly. Lord Tarly, is there a reason for this insult to your king? Asked Lord Commander Loras Tyrell, narrowing his eyes at the unflinching Lord of Horn Hill. Calm down, Sir Loras, you're not on a tourney. But Robb Stark is out there and fighting and winning great victories against Lannister armies and earning glory. He's leading as a king should lead, by example and fighting on the battlefield himself, if the stories are to be believed that he personally defeated the Kingslayer himself and fights alongside his pet direwolf. And he's not playing at war or feasting, said Lord Tarly, openly criticizing his grace's march from the Stormlands and into the Reach for the people to see what a benevolent king he would be firsthand and to harden the army for the battles to come with tourneys. No one can deny the young wolf's ability as a warrior and as a leader, my Lord Tarly, but he is the rightful Lord of Winterfell, not the rightful king, said his grace. I think that he knows that he isn't the rightful king, your grace. Aegon the Conqueror didn't conquer the Seven Kingdoms because it was birthright. No, he conquered because he could, said Lord Tarly. Your grace, I think you'd need to understand that the lords of the North, the Riverlands, the Vale and Dorne chose him to be their king. Because as Lord Tarly said, he leads by example. He is a proven warrior and commander. And the nobles and small folk of the Riverlands will undoubtedly see him as a hero for saving them from the Lannister onslaught. And the Dornish will see him as the hero who delivered them the two men who had committed a great act of evil against House Martell, which your brother, King Robert, failed to so much as recognize. And the Northerners will see him as the young wolf who fights to avenge his father and right the wrongs wrought on his family and on the North by the Lannisters, explained Lord Mathis Rowan. Are you saying that we should back him, Lord Rowan? Asked Mace Tyrell accusingly. Lord Tyrell, I think that Lord Rowan was simply explaining the reasons as to why his bannermen back him. In all honesty, Robb Stark is a very admirable man, but that doesn't mean that I think that we should follow him, said Sir Baelor Hightower, who said it frustratingly to his liege lord. So, what can we do? We've been sending letters for hopes of alliances with the rest of the kingdoms, but only the Stormlands and the Reach have answered my call. What is there to do, now? Asked the king. Your grace, I think there is but one option for us right now. We should march for King's Landing without delay and put you and Queen Margaery on the Iron Throne, said Sir Ronald Connington. There is another course we can take, said Queen Margaery. And what is that, my queen? His grace asked. Robb Stark clearly ignored your letter to him. Harold Arryn also. Perhaps meeting them, the Tullys and the Martells face to face should clear up any doubt, and maybe they will join us, and by then, no army will be able to stand against the combined might of Storm's End, Highgarden, Winterfell, Riverrun, the Eyrie and Sunspear, said Queen Margaery. Oh, my queen. You are cunning, behind that beautiful face and charming smile. But I do hope that King Renly would listen to me as he listens to you, Brian thought as she stood behind her king and queen. A sensible idea, your grace. But it might be a waste of time. Perhaps taking King's Landing and capturing the capital for good would send a clear message to all of the realm, to Tywin Lannister as well as Robb Stark and Stannis. Stannis wouldn't dare to stand against us once we control the capital, and Robb Stark would have no cause left to fight for. We have the greatest army ever formed in Westeros history and more than enough supplies to get to King's Landing and begin a siege, said Lord Lester Morrigan. The lords all began arguing amongst themselves until Brian noticed the king trying to call for silence. Silence for his grace. Brian shouted. The hall was silenced and the arguing lords all sat back down. Thank you, Sir Brian, said the king. Brian felt a blush as he turned to her and smiled as he said it. I'm glad it's dark and they are all facing his grace. It wouldn't do to see me blush. Your plan does have merit, Lord Morrigan, but I will not have it said that I didn't offer Robb Stark and his allies a chance to right their wrongs and to see sense. We shall meet them and negotiate. Tyrion X. Jaime. It is good to see you. Tyrion said as he saw his brother return where he stood at the entrance to the Mudgate. Jaime looked exhausted and not at all like when he had last seen him, which was when Tyrion had left Winterfell to go to see the Wall whilst travelling with Jon Snow and Benjen Stark. Jaime looked bedraggled and unshaven, his fighting arm was heavily bandaged and his clothes looked battered and coarse. Tyrion said Jaime, his eyes watering. The two brothers hugged and Tyrion asked, did they treat you well? Better than I expected. Not surprising really, given how honourable the Starks are. Honourable and stupid, he replied. There's the Jaime I know and love, thought Tyrion. Where is Cersei? Jaime asked. I should really tell him. One of either three things, brother. Mollycoddling Joffrey or trying to get power back by begging father to get rid of me, said Tyrion. Yes, I heard that father named you Hand of the King in his absence. You're rising up in the world, he said as they walked through the streets. What was the other, he asked, remembering what Tyrion had said. Fucking one of her lovers, Tyrion admitted. What? Jaime demanded. He stopped. You may have honor in not being with any other woman than her, but she is not the same. She's been fucking cousin Lancel, Sir Osmond Kettleback, who is the newest member of the Kingsguard, his two younger brothers and Moonboy for all I care, he explained. It wouldn't surprise me if she was fucking Moonboy, a dim-witted court fool he may be, but he can be inventive with his hands when performing tricks for the court. As for the newest member of the Kingsguard, she's been fucking him, probably to keep him loyal to her, the same with his two sellsword brothers. Why would she do this? She. Because she gets bored easily. If you don't believe me, confront Lancel. He is a coward of a young man and will spill all, in spite of being knighted. Probably because he drugged Robert's wine when he and that boar killed each other, Tyrion replied. Why are there new members of the Kingsguard? He asked. Cersei and Joffrey stupidly dismissed Sir Barristan Selmy, calling him too old, and appointed you commander of the Kingsguard. Preston Greenfield and Boros Blount are both dead, killed by small folk in a riot whilst defending Joffrey when he was walking amongst the people to assure them all that the king was with them. Little good it did, he explained. Who else is in the Kingsguard that is new? He asked, looking furious over the dismissal of Sir Barristan. Well, Sandor Clegane, though he refuses to be referred to as Sir. Then there is one of Cersei's many lovers, Sir Osmond Kettleback, a former sellsword. And then there is Sir Balon Swan, he explained. Jaime grumbled. Sir Barristan was the only one worthy of the cloak. Why is it all of the best knights are all dead and the unworthy ones are in the Kingsguard? Are you including yourself amongst that number? Tyrion asked. No. Mandon Moore and Meryn Trant are unworthy fuckers, as were Preston Greenfield and Boros Blount. Aris Oakurt is an honourable and good knight but not a good fighter. Now a fucking sellsword is in the Kingsguard. But Balon Swan was a good choice. Yours. Indeed. I'll leave you to guess who appointed Clegane and Kettleback, he replied. How did the Hound react to his brother's news? He asked. Oh, he was distraught. At the fact that he didn't get to kill him himself. Varys said that for 5 whole days, the Mountain and Amory Lorque were screaming from the old palace in Sunspear, Tyrion said. Is it true then? Dawn supports Robb Stark, he asked. Yes. Prince Oberyn leads 10,000 men and have been spotted sailing past the Shields Islands, said Tyrion. What of Renly and Stannis? Jaime asked. Not doing anything other than gathering their forces and sending letters to gather support, he said. They soon reached the Red Keep. Tyrion could see Joffrey dressed resplendently in red and gold clothing, whilst Cersei looked delighted to see Jaime, and Tyrion noticed Sir Osmond Kettleback standing in front of Cersei. How very protective. I'm so glad to see that you're taking your Kingsguard duties, very seriously. Sir Osmond, Tyrion sarcastically thought. I remember when Arianne Martell was welcomed to King's Landing and Cersei called her a whore. Now look at them both. According to Varys, Arianne Martell has not laid with man or woman since leaving King's Landing, and Cersei has been taking many lovers to her bed in Jaime's absence. Jaime looked angry when he saw the unfamiliar Kingsguard knight and Lancel standing with Cersei. Do they think that Cersei loves any of them? How many times has she told that to Jaime? Uncle Jaime. Welcome back to King's Landing. I'm so glad to see you are well. Be assured that the northern savages who did this to you will all perish after I've killed Robb Stark. Joffrey boasted, at which the nearby courtiers and nobles clapped and cheered. Ass-licking sycophants, by the gods do they make me sicker than the smell of this city ever could. Thank you very much for your kind words, your grace. They offer great comfort to a knight so far from his duties to his king, Jaime said pleasantly, with a bow to his nephew. Impressive. Will he let it all out on Cersei or her lovers once he is bathed, shaved and wearing his Kingsguard armor? That will be a good show. I won't miss that. Inside, Tyrion was going through what he needed to make sure that the city was ready for a siege by either Renly, Stannis or Robb Stark. With the Dornish numbers, Tyrion knew that Robb Stark was the most dangerous out of the three, with 4 kingdoms of Westeros at his back, half of Westeros. Renly and his army were last seen having tourneys and feasting their way as they slowly marched through the Stormlands and towards the Reach, acting as though this was a great and never-ending tourney and feast, rather than a war. And Stannis was building a strong navy and hiring pirates and sellswords. Tyrion had already commissioned the alchemists guild with creating as much wildfire as they possibly could. Tyrion's plan was to send a fireship towards whatever navy approached Blackwater Bay and destroy it from a safe distance. And also, to have soldiers throw small pots of wildfire onto the oncoming soldiers as they charged the walls and the gates. He had sent a raven to his father saying that Jaime was safe in King's Landing and that he was preparing the city for a siege from any attacker. He also made sure of Shae's safety from any attempts of Cersei's to blackmail Tyrion into submission. He ensured this by having her as handmaiden to Myrcella after her previous one was evacuated from the city with her family because they were of Reach nobility and they didn't want to be expelled from their lands by either Mace Tyrell or Renly Baratheon. Things seemed to be going well, and with Jaime's return to safety, Tyrion was, for the most part, content. But then he heard very troubling news from Varys during a small council session a week after Jaime's return. This is madness. It can't be true, said Cersei. I'm afraid it is true, your grace. Robb Stark has laid claim to the Iron Throne. He has received a unanimous backing when asking the bannermen of Winterfell, Riverrun, the Eyrie and Sunspear if they would support him. And he has pledged to marry Arianne Martell, said Varys. I remember seeing Arianne and Robb talking in King's Landing, gods that feels like it was many years ago. They always struck me as an odd pairing, but at the time, they looked like good friends, in spite of how longingly they looked at each other as Robb said his goodbyes and left King's Landing. That Martell whore. What good will that do him? Cersei asked incredulously. Are you really sure that you of all people want to call her a whore? Especially when it sounds as though she will stay in her marriage bed, unlike the bed you share with Jaime. Or is it shared now? I wonder. That Martell woman brings with her over 10,000 of Dornish soldiers, your grace. And Robb Stark now has the backing of 4 kingdoms, half of Westeros. This is no foe that we can take on easily, nor will it be an army that Lord Tywine can easily defeat on the battlefield, said Davon. Whomever comes to King's Landing will be crushed at the walls, Cersei replied with certainty. Tyrion rolled his eyes at her statement. What of Renly and Stannis? Asked Jaime. Renly is still in the Stormlands, doing very little but waiting for his army to be as large as it can be. At this rate he will run out of food for his whole army before they can make any move on either Stannis, Robb Stark or even us, said Varys. What of Stannis? Asked Tyrion. He has a large navy now. Just not that many troops to fill them, at best a little over 5,000. There is a rumor that he is preparing for sailing out of Dragonstone, Lord Hand. But where he goes with it, is anyone's guess. But it's unlikely to be King's Landing, Varys replied. What is father doing? Cersei asked. In his last raven to me, he said that Uncle Stafford has amassed a new army from Casterly Rock and is marching it to the Riverlands as we speak. And father has a sellsword force of 2,500 marauding across the Riverlands, calling themselves the Brave Companions, led by a slobber-speaking Kohoric brigand called Vargo Hoat, said Tyrion. How many soldiers are there in the city? Jaime asked. To which Sir Jacelyn Bywater said 10,000 gold cloaks, 1,000 red cloaks of Casterly Rock, 2,500 Crown Lands soldiers, 800 knights and 500 sellswords, Sir Jaime. What about ships? 50 seaworthy and capable warships, Sir Jaime. We have commandeered some merchant ships, but they aren't capable of taking on the navy of Stannis, said Sir Jacelyn. The chain for the bay has been complete and laid. That'll stop Stannis' fleet from getting too close, those that aren't burned by the wildfire ship, said Tyrion. Glad to see that I'm not the only war-minded Lannister here, Jaime commented with a smile to Tyrion. My worry, Sir Jaime, is that we won't have enough to hold King's Landing even if we push back an enemy assault, said Sir Jacelyn. We'll position some companies to harass any besieging army's supply lines. So, they will have to retreat. If they want to starve us, they'll find themselves starving long before we ever will, Tyrion suggested, at which Jaime nodded. Whom should we be more worried about in terms of attacking King's Landing, Lord Hand? Robb Stark, Renly or Stannis, asked Davin. I think that the best person to ask would be the commander of the Kingsguard, said Tyrion. Jaime looked up and immediately said Robb Stark. He may not have ships, but he is full of surprises and invention. His armies all love him and think that they are following an unstoppable force of nature. He has the soldiers and the war-hardened bannermen at his back. Renly knows nothing of war and would be more likely to listen to Loras Tyrell or Mace Tyrell's advice rather than the likes of Randyll Tarly, if Renly did decide to fight. And Stannis, though he has the ships, he doesn't have the soldiers or the popular support. Robb Stark is a child. With the reinforcements that Uncle Stafford brings, Father will bring him to heel and destroy his boyish dreams of taking the Iron Throne, Cersei said stupidly as she refilled her wine glass. What is her problem? Is she simply unable to picture Robb Stark as anything other than the shy and homesick teenaged boy whom was once the guest of her late husband? Or is she plainly fucking stupid? Possibly the latter. In fact, yes, it's the latter. This is Cersei after all. Have you forgotten that your brother was taken prisoner by Robb Stark and Robb Stark's army now outnumbers Father's army nearly 4-1? Tyrion asked, amazed at how stupid his sister was in regards to Robb Stark. All of which were because of luck. He won't last against Father. No one can, she said confidently whilst drinking from her glass. Robert's influence. She's drinking far more than she used to. At this rate, she'll be able to beat me at drinking contests. Until you two. Theon Greyjoy, Alfie Allen. This isn't what I wanted when I landed here. Back home. All of the days I dreamt of returning home, and now that I'm back, I'm wondering, did I leave home when I was forced from Pike as a boy after the end of the rebellion, or did I leave home at Winterfell when this war began? Theon was angry ever since he reunited with his father, sister Asha and his uncles Aeron and Victorian. They didn't take him seriously or show him any kindness. Mother was at least kind to Theon, but that was it. Father was cruel and hard and acted as though it was Theon's own fault for being a prisoner of the Greenlanders for so long. It was your fucking fault for failing in the rebellion. Don't put that on me. And I've been amongst those Greenlanders for most of my life, so how the fuck is that my fault? Uncle Aeron was quite kind to Theon and put him under the waters of Pike to bring him back into the worship of the drowned god. What is dead may never die, but grows harder and stronger. Asha, his sister, treated him with scorn and laughed at him, but was kind to him at times. His large, burly and bullish uncle Victorian however thought Theon was weak and thought him a coward for bringing an alliance offer from Robb to Father. They hate me. They hate me for being too much of a Greenlander and think me weak. How is it my fault that they lost to Robert and Stannis Baratheon, Tywin Lannister, Jon Arryn, Paxter Redwyne, Randyll Tarly and Ned Stark? Thinking of Ned Stark made Theon sad. When I was first brought to Winterfell as a ward, he was always kind to me. Never like my actual father or my brothers Roderick and Maron. Roderick and Maron were always cruel to me, and they were my older brothers. So why is it that I love the Starks more than my actual family? And so, after being brought to a meeting in Father's Solar to discuss the future with Asha, Uncle Aeron, Uncle Victorian, Father announced his plans. Father explained, our ships are ready. We have the men, the ships, the means and blessings from the drowned god for the Ironborn to free once again. We aren't Greenlanders, satisfied with what lands we have. We are Ironborn, we take what we want, said Father, bringing a grin to Uncle Victorian and Asha. The Greenlanders will learn this soon. Starting with the north. Whilst Theon's old wolf friends are too busy fighting the lions, we shall take the moat and then all of the north from there. We will carve a kingdom fit for the Ironborn from Moat Cailin to Last Hearth, making the drowned god proud and honor our ancestors, father proclaimed as he pointed at the north on a large-scale map on his table. How many soldiers do they have in the north? Asher asked Theon. 5000 right now. But if they get mobilized, 10,000 at the least, as reinforcements for the war with the Lannisters. At most, 15,000 Theon replied. Uncle Victorian viciously grinned like a warmonger and said easy prey. We have 150 ships at the ready and 30,000 Ironborn ready to spill blood and gift dead wolves to the drowned god. Plenty more will join as soon as more ships are built and tales of our victories spread across. They won't be easy prey when they are fighting to protect their country from Ironborn, and even more will join the armies of the north if they want to defend their homes and families, Theon thought, but he chose not to say this. Victorian, you will take to the stony shore and advance on to Torrens Square, and from there you will have good access to the rest of the north. Asher, you will raid along the coast and get to Deepwood Motte, said father. What about Moat Cailin? Theon asked as he pointed at the strategically most important fortress in the north. The Cleftyr can take that, said father. Dagmar Cleftyr, the Reaver of Reavers. Theon remembered him from when he was a boy and he had first taught Theon how to use a bow and an axe. He was always smiling, with a scary grin, for his two lips were split into four from a blow by an axe. He has been raiding all his life. Moat Cailin won't be a challenge for him, unless a Cranogman sticks a poisoned spear through his throat. And what about me? Theon asked. You. Take some villages and prove yourself an Ironborn. Bring me back a few chickens whilst you're at it, said father, whilst Asher chuckled and Uncle Victorian laughed. This won't be easy, father. The Northerners know their country better than you do and they won't be taken by surprise easily. It's an enormous country, larger than all other kingdoms combined, and we wouldn't have enough Ironborn to maintain a stronghold on the north. And with the war with the Lannisters, thousands of Northerners are taking up arms and being trained in case they need reinforcements, said Theon. Then go and join them, you fucking Greenlander. Go back and play with the wolves. You seem to think of the north more as home than the Iron Islands. You're an idiot, just like your brothers, if you think you can just come back here and pretend that you're a Kraken, when you've got the fangs of a wolf and fur growing out of your ears, said Uncle Victorian before hawking and spitting on his boots. Is that how it's going to be? Well then, you can take all of the north by yourselves. You seem so uninterested in my advice and help, and you clearly won't respect me. So, I guess I'll just have to earn it, but not in the north, no. If you think I'm going to raid the north, the one place where I'm actually respected and liked, then you're fucking mistaken. Maybe they'll teach you that this whole plan is fucking stupid. Whilst you're playing raid and pillage, I'm going to play the Game of Thrones. And so, that night, when Theon was alone in his old bedchambers, he wrote a letter, warning Robb of the danger. Theon looked at the candle on his desk. He considered burning the letter rather than sending it. No. Robb is my brother. The Starks are more my family than these fuckers are. They hate me and laugh at me and act as though it was my fault that I was a ward of Ned Stark. I'll make my name as a Reaver and as an Ironborn, but not in the north. I'm going to raid and plunder the Westerlands. Whilst they are watching Uncle Victorian, Asher and the Cleftyr attack the north, the Lannisters at home won't think that the Ironborn will come for them. Let my sister and my uncle struggle in the north and I'll laugh at them and spit on their boots the next time that I see them. Theon decided not to burn the letter, and he snuck inside the rookery and took a raven and sent it to Riverrun. Good luck, Robb. Protect the north from these fucking idiots. Theon turned around and went to his bedchambers. Well, no turning back now. Theon went to the docks at Lordsport and was given the command of his new ship, which he named the Sea Bitch. He had 8 ships, including the Sea Bitch. Raid some villages like father said. No, if there's anything I've learned from the stories of the Ironborn of old, it's that they take what they want and do what they like, not do what they are told. He saw his men and they looked at him with scorn and looked close to laughing. Think the same as my father, sister and uncles, do you? All right, you salty fuckers, listen. Theon shouted. Whatever they were expecting, it wasn't that. Now, as you all know, I've spent most of my years amongst the wolves in Winterfell. Uncle Victorian says that I'm more wolf than Kraken, said Theon. Yeah, you are a fucking wolf pup, shouted a bald one with an ugly face, at which many of them laughed. And yet, our king tells me that to prove myself, I should raid some villages and bring him back a few chickens, said Theon. This made them laugh. Good, they are laughing at that, our king's order. But this is your choice, said Theon, a cunning grin formed on his face whilst they looked confused. Theon paused for a moment before he continued. Yes, we can take the fight to the wolves, yes, we can raid some villages and take a few fishermen's daughters for salt wives, ugly that they might be. We may even get to Winterfell if we can take them by surprise. But for what? What is there in the north worth taking and bringing back home? Wolf furs. Ugly women. Stupid boys for thralls. Is that what you want to be remembered as? No, of course we fucking don't, said one, which the others all agreed to. So, what's stopping us from going after richer and more delicious targets? Whilst Asher, Uncle Victorian and the Cleftjaw are invading the north, the mighty lions in the west won't be watching their backs for Ironborn to raid their ships, burn Fair Isle, loot Lannisport and take gold, silver and beautiful women. So, lads, what say you? Shall we do what the king tells us, or shall we do what we want and take what we want from the Lannisters, the richest Greenlanders of the lot? At that, they all cheered. Good. Now we can get rich, and maybe even raid Lannisport. Maybe instead of some chickens, I'll bring you victories and gold and plunder that you could never have gotten, father. You think about that when Asher, Uncle Victorian and Dagmar Cleftjaw return home blooded and battered and with fewer ships and Ironborn than they left home with. Chapter 29, Chapter 27. Chapter text. Catelyn X. Sansa looks happy with Harold. Robb was right to recommend him. He looks entranced by her. Catelyn felt happy that her daughter looked as though she was happy with the handsome, dashing and charming Lord of the Eyrie. And he looked awestruck by her mere presence. He's in love with her already. It reminds me of when I first met Brandon. Edmure and Roslyn also seemed happy that they would be wed. They were sitting happily together and Edmure was telling her jokes and making her giggle. Good. At the age of 25, it's about time he was married rather than traveling from brothel to brothel. I hope she keeps him to his marriage bed and to never stray. And then there was her eldest son and Princess Arianne. She could see Robb and Arianne chatting happily and they looked so in love with each other. Earlier, she had been apprehensive about their marriage because of her reputation. But from what she had heard about her recently, she had not lived up to her old reputation for a long time now and that she never even looked at another man or woman other than her betrothed as far as Catelyn could see. They do love each other. I remember when he talked of her on his return from King's Landing, he looked like a boy who thinks he is in love, but now he truly is in love. The next day, the first wedding was that of Edmure and Roslyn, at the September of Riverrun. In place of the aging and decrepit Lord Walder, Sir Stephen escorted his younger sister down the aisle and to Edmure. Septon Trentan spoke to Edmure, "You may bring the bride under your protection." Edmure unfastened his cloak, embroidered with the sigil and colours of House Tully, and gently took off Roslyn's free-coloured cloak and placed it aside and wrapped his Tully cloak around her, with a shy, but kindly, smile on his face. "My lords, my ladies. We stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of husband and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever." And as they held hands, he tied a ribbon around their holding hands and said, "Let it be known that Edmure Tully and Roslyn Free are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder." And as he untied and unravelled the ribbon, he announced to all in attendance in the sight of the seven, "I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity." He turned to Edmure and Roslyn. "Look upon each other and say the words." "Father, smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger," they said together. Edmure said, "I am hers and she is mine. From this day, until the end of my days. I am his and he is mine. From this day, until the end of my days," said Roslyn. "With this kiss, I pledge my love," said Edmure before kissing Roslyn. An hour later, in the same September, Septon Trentan made the same ceremony for Sansa and Harold. To walk Sansa down the aisle, Catelyn did this, as Robb would be getting married later that day in the Godswood, though also with them was Sansa's direwolf, Lady. As she walked to her seat, Catelyn saw that Sansa was composed and calm, whereas Harold looked nervous and was taking a few deep breaths. Lady stood behind the bride and groom and looked lovingly at the bride and at the groom. No doubt if he was a bad man, Lady would sense it and show no fear in attacking. They repeated the same vows and finally Harold said, with this kiss, I pledge my love. The two kissed each other longer than Edmure and Roslyn. They love each other. They've only known each other for a day. But Catelyn was happy that this was the wedding that Sansa always dreamed of having, to a brave, gentle and strong young man whom would always treat her well. And Lady followed the two as they walked out of the September. And the final wedding took place in the Riverrun Godswood. Not as large as the Godswood of Winterfell, but it wasn't torn down or burned despite a majority of Riverlands worshipping the Seven, though there were still a minority who worshipped the old gods, including noble riverlords, such as the Blackwood family. And rather than incur their wrath and the anger of their northern neighbors and bannermen whom still worshipped the old gods, all Tully lords have since kept the Godswood. It was used in Catelyn's wedding to Ned Stark, just before he marched to war against the Targaryens. Again, Catelyn stood alongside her child before the weirwood tree. Robb stood with his Stark embroidered cloak, and Grey Wind at his feet, as Prince Oberyn escorted Arianne Martell. Who comes before the old gods this day? Asked Catelyn. This feels strange. I worship the Seven, and yet I need to do this for my son's wedding. Arianne of the House Martell comes here to be wed. A woman grown, true-born and noble. She comes to beg the blessings of the gods. Who comes to claim her? Asked Prince Oberyn. Robb stepped forwards a few steps. Robb of House Stark. Lord of Winterfell. Who gives her? He still refuses to be known as the king and hasn't even had a crown made for himself. Oberyn of House Martell. Her father's brother, he said before stepping back. Princess Arianne, do you take this man? Asked Catelyn as she stepped between the bride and groom. I take this man, she said with a loving smile at Robb, which he replied with a similar smile. You may now cloak the bride under your protection, said Catelyn. Robb gently unfastened her cloak after she bowed slightly, not needing to bow too much, for she was over a foot shorter than Robb. The cloak which he pulled over her was bridal white and decorated with a silver direwolf. She rose and they said the vows. I am hers and she is mine. I am his and he is mine. As she stood up again, Robb bent his knees slightly and he gently cupped her face with his hands and they kissed longingly, as though they had been waiting for this moment impatiently for a very long time. I'm glad that their bedchambers will have thick walls and that I'll be sleeping on the other end of the castle tonight. Arianne X. What saddened Arianne about her wedding was that her parents and her brothers couldn't be there. She hadn't seen her mother ever since she had left Dorne for her home of Norphos after her separation from her father. And though she hadn't gone on well with her brothers and her father recently, she was upset that they couldn't be there for the wedding. But what truly made her happy was the fact that she was at last with Robb and that they were now married. Though she was a lifetime worshipper of the Seven, she was happy to be married in the Riverrun Godswood. Will our children worship the old gods or the new? She asked the day before the wedding. Let them decide as they grow up. Although I think that many in the realm would be upset at the thought of an old gods worshipper, as King Robb replied honestly. Arianne held both of his hands and said, if they knew what kind of man you are, just as I do, then they would never ever doubt you. So, fuck what any fanatic thinks you should believe in. I believe in you being a better king and I'll always be by your side for whatever comes our way. I love you, Ari, he said tenderly before he leant in and kissed her. Gods, I love it when he says my nickname like that, she thought as she kissed back and resisted the temptation to tear his clothes off. During the wedding feast, she and Robb met the other two newlywed couples. Your Grace. Princess, said Roslyn. Aunt Roslyn, please. I'm not king until I've been crowned, Robb said modestly. Roslyn looked as though she felt it weird that a man her age, if not a little younger, was addressing her as his aunt. Your dress looks very beautiful, Princess. Is it Dornish? Roslyn asked. No, it's Norvoshi. A gift from my mother, she replied. Her wedding dress was a gift from mother before she left to return to her home of the free city of Norphos. Promise me that when you get married, Ari, that you'll wear this and that you'll be happy with your husband, she said. I will, mother. I promise, she said, crying and hugging mother as she said her farewells to her children and uneasy farewell to her husband. It feels wrong to celebrate like this when our enemies are on our doorstep, said Rob's uncle Ed Muir. Uncle, we've dealt deadly blows to Tywin Lannister. Let them come when they want, we would know of it long before they even set foot outside of Harrenhal. And we deserve this chance to enjoy what happiness and love that we can before we go back to the war, said Robb. And then they went to Rob's sister and his new good brother, both of whom were kissing and telling each other jokes and funny stories, and with Sansa's direwolf, lady, sitting near Sansa and eating from a platter filled with slices of lamb. Sansa, you looked absolutely beautiful today, Robb said. Thank you, Robb. Princess Arianne, congratulations, she said, bowing her head to her new good sister. Gods, she is beautiful. Harold is a lucky man. Are all of Robb's siblings this good looking? Arianne wondered as she and Sansa gave each other a quick kiss on the cheek. This is the sort of wedding I've always dreamed about having ever since I was a little boy. To have all my friends in attendance, to be married to a beautiful and wonderful woman, and to feel as though nothing else matters in the world when my wife is with me here and now, Harold said as he and his new good brother shook hands. You're almost as romantic as Robb, Arianne thought as Sansa looked affectionately at her husband. Arianne and Robb held each other's hand before they sat back down. Soon after sitting down, Arianne noticed that his hand was shaking under the table. And so, she held his hand and whispered, "It's all right, Robb. Everything is all right." He smiled at her and she smiled back as she took his still full wine cup and drank a little from it whilst looking at him with her old seductive charm. "I'm going to drive you mad with desire before we go to bed," she thought as she put his cup down. "It's time for the bedding," shouted a northern lord. "If anyone tries to rip apart this dress, the one mother gifted me before she left, I will smear their hands with meaty juices and let Grey Wind and Lady eat their hands." "Robb, I don't want this dress ruined. It was a gift from my mother before she left," she whispered. "It's my last memory of her and back when we were a happier family." "Say no more," said Robb as they stood up and Robb picked her up himself as though she was weightless. Arianne loudly gasped in response as Ed Muir, Roslyn, Harold and Sansa were lifted high by the lords and ladies. "You really don't want anyone to touch me, do you?" she asked teasingly as she stroked his rough bearded cheeks with both hands. "Tonight, the only one touching my wife is me," Robb said. That and more, Arianne thought naughtily of all the things they would do tonight, whilst her underclothes moistened at the thought. Robb carried her up to their bedchamber and as he lay her gently down in bed, he ran his hands her oiled hair and said, "I love you so much." "I love you too," she said as she pulled down her dress and he pulled off his northern furs, his tunic and pulled down his breeches. "Gods, he is so muscular. He makes every knight I've ever fucked look like a thin and puny little squire," she thought as she licked her lips at seeing his broad-shouldered and muscled body before looking further down. "Almost as long as Lance. Glad to see that I'm not the only excited," she thought as she lay back down on the bed. "Not yet," Robb said with a naughty grin on his face. "What?" Arianne tried to say before Robb knelt and pushed her legs apart. "Jon, Theon and I call this the wolf's kiss," he said before he thrust his tongue inside. "Oh, gods. Fuck." Arianne screamed in surprise as she ran her hands through Robb's curly hair. "You better give me the wolf's kiss whenever I want it," she thought as she arched her head back and moaned loudly and gripped the bed with both hands. Gods, how did he get so good with his tongue? When Robb finished, he stood back up and bent over and kissed and licked Arianne's tits before he kissed Arianne, just as she was breathing to recover from his wolf kiss. "Did you enjoy that?" he asked, breaking from the kiss. "I did, but now let me return the favor," she whispered breathlessly in his ear before pushing him to lie down on the bed and she put both hands on his very endowed cock. "I think that this big man here deserves a little something before the main course, don't you?" she asked with a grin. Before he could say anything, she kissed it and licked it before opening wide and pushing herself down. Hearing him moan made her feel even wetter between her legs as his cock filled her mouth and she could feel it reach to the furthest part of her throat. Finally, pulling out, she coughed slightly before looking down at Robb. "Now, let's have even more fun," Robb said as he sat up and started kissing Arianne before kissing her neck until he started kissing and licking her tits as pulled her down. Robb pushed inside her and Arianne moaned loudly as his cock filled inside her. "Yes. Oh, Robb, yes. Harder. Harder. Come on," she nearly screamed as his thrusts were harder and her tits filled his mouth. Gods, spending every night with you for the rest of our lives is going to be so much fun. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Rob shouted before his seed filled inside her. As they both lay on bed, arms wrapped around each other, Ariane kissed his neck before looking down at his cock. I think we can do more, she said naughtily. Are you sure? I don't want to hurt you, Rob said with concern. Oh, I'm very sure. And so is he, she replied, pointing at his cock. They continued well through the night, before they finally lay down in bed, exhausted. That's 5 times he's spent his seed inside me tonight. And it was 3 times that night we reunited. I must be with child, surely, Ariane thought as she lay beside him, nuzzling him and kissing his neck. Again? Rob asked as he kissed her, though he was out of breath as he said it. We'll save that for the morning, husband. I look forward to it, wife said Rob as he kissed her again. Rob and I are husband and wife. Gods, I just want to spend the rest of my life in bed with him and for us to do nothing but fuck until we're breathless and hot on a cold winter's night, she thought as she closed her eyes and held his hands. Gendry X. Gendry had gotten out of bed with a splitting headache, the day after the 3 weddings. In fact, the small folk had called the whole event, the Great Blue Wedding. Gendry left his chambers after dunking his head into a bucket of water and then walked down to the hall, where servants were laying out food and drink for breakfast. He took a drink of water and some bacon, bread and sausages before he saw Sir Brynden Blackfish. Sir Brynden, he said. Sir Gendry. So, has all of this put you off getting married like myself? He asked with a grin. Gendry grinned as he said, maybe after the war is over and Rob is king, sir. But right now, all the land I have is a house in Storm's End. If Rob awards me some land, then perhaps I will marry. But for now, I'll just take what comes, he replied. Good man. Now, where are the newly married couples? He wondered before the doors opened. There was Edmure and Roslyn Tully. Both didn't look tired or if they had headaches from too much drinking. Well, at least this time the married woman that my nephew has bedded is married to him, Sir Brynden commented, which made Gendry chuckle. And as more lords and ladies came down for breakfast, their number eventually included Harold, Sansa, Rob and Ariane. The latter 2 couples looked exhausted and bedraggled. Ariane's usual oiled and curled hair was straight and messy, and she looked as though she winced with pain every time she made just 1 step, and she clenched her jaw as she sat down on a chair Rob pulled out for her at the high table. Rob was drinking lots of water and yawning a lot as though he had just fought in a large melee at a tourney and had no rest since then. Sansa and Harold didn't look as exhausted as Ariane and Rob, but their hair was quite untidy and they were regularly kissing each other and they put their arms around each other. Gendry walked towards his friends and their new wives. How are the newlywed husbands? He asked cheerfully as he clapped the backs of Harold and Rob. Rob winced in pain as Gendry's strong hand gently slapped his back. Gendry giggled and Harold chuckled as he asked Rob, did Tywin Lannister send a lion to attack you whilst you were in bed, or did a viper start biting you? Harry, don't, Sansa said, holding her husband's hand as she said it. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself, he explained, still chortling as he said it. Gendry sat down with them and asked, so, Lady Sansa Arryn, what are you doing now? Will you be going back to Winterfell or to your new home in the Eyrie? I shall be returning to Winterfell briefly to pack my things, but then I'll go to the Eyrie to settle into my new home, she said with an excited smile before she realized what Gendry said. Lady Sansa Arryn. That'll take a lot of getting used to, Sansa commented. It took a fair amount of time to get used to being called Harold Arryn after spending my childhood as Harold Hardang, Harold commented. I'm still getting used to being called Sir Gendry Baratheon. What of you, Ariane? Will you be Ariane Stark or will you stay as Ariane Martell? Gendry asked as he turned to her. He knew that often ladies either adopted their husband's name upon marriage, or would retain their maiden name if they were from a great house. I shall be Ariane Stark, I think, she said proudly before kissing her husband's cheek. Now, Gendry, we must get you married soon, said Ariane. Gendry shook his head and said no, not yet. Like Harold 2 years ago, all I have to my name is a house in Storm's End, though Uncle Renly will probably have it confiscated once he finds out I still fight alongside you, Your Grace. Family doesn't really mean much to either of your father's brothers, does it? Harold jokingly asked. Maester Vimen walked to the high table and said, Your Grace. A letter from Pike. Ah, news from Theon. Will his father join us then? He passed Robb the letter, sealed with the seal of the Kraken of Greyjoy. He opened it and his eyes opened wide upon reading it. What is it, Robb? Asked Sansa. It's from Theon. It's a warning. Balon Greyjoy is preparing for an invasion of the north, now that he has declared himself king of the Iron Islands. He has amassed 300 ships and is building more. They are going to invade the north. But Theon alone is leading his ships to raid the Westerlands, he replied, looking up when he finished reading out. Good that Theon told us, Harold pointed out, his eyes opened wide in shock. Aye. But that doesn't change the fact that soon the Ironborn will invade the north. Gendry, get Lord Bolton, said Robb. Gendry stood up from his chair and found the pasty-skinned, fear-inspiring and unemotional Lord of the Dreadfort drinking Hippocras, and Gendry shivered when he looked at him with his cold, ghost-grey, empty and unblinking eyes. Sir Gendry, he asked quietly, forcing him to listen closely. My lord, his grace wishes to speak to you, now, he replied after bowing his head to him. Bolton finished his drink and finished eating a sausage before he wiped his pale lips with a handkerchief and then stood up from his chair and followed Gendry to the high table. Your Grace, said Lord Bolton with a bow. Lord Bolton, Balon Greyjoy is sending an invasion fleet of 300 ships to plunder and ravage the north. I need you to return there and lead the defense and push them back to the sea. I'll send ravens to Torrens Square, Barrowton, White Harbour, Carhold and Last Hearth to have troops ready to send to the Dreadfort for your arrival, and I'll inform Howland Reed to prepare for your arrival at Moat Cailin, said Robb. Lord Bolton nodded and said, I'll send a raven to Domeric and have him ready the men of the Dreadfort, and I shall ride out within the hour with my men, your Grace, before taking his leave. The Ironborn would prefer death in battle to being taken prisoner by the Boltons, said Sansa. Why? Arianne asked. The sigil of House Bolton is not for decoration. The flayed man is something that they take pride in. Though my lord father had banned the use of such tortures, he knew he couldn't enforce it on the Boltons, so he ordered that they do it in secret. And they still do, said Sansa, shivering as she explained. Fuck, that's scary. I don't know whether or not to be glad he is on our side. Roose Bolton left Riverrun with 2,000 men and rode back home to the north within the hour. And soon after they left, a company of scouts led by Sir Jasper Redfort arrived at Riverrun. Sir Jasper came to the high table. He bowed to Robb and said, Your Grace, Stafford Lannister and his army have left the Westerlands and have set foot in the Riverlands, near the Golden Tooth, and are heading on the river road towards Harrenhal. How many troops does he bring with him, Sir Jasper? Asked Robb. 25,000 infantry, Your Grace. Half of them look like good soldiers, but the rest of them are farm boys and conscripts, along with some sellswords, he explained. And cavalry? Robb asked. 3,000, Your Grace, he said. Robb stood up and said, Good work, Sir Jasper. Have some food and rest. You've more than earned it. As Sir Jasper took his leave, Robb told Maester Vimen, bring Lord Edmure, Sir Brynden and Prince Oberyn to Lord Tully's Solar. He, Harold, Gendry and Edmure walked to the Solar and were joined by Oberyn Martell and Brynden Blackfish. How far away is Stafford Lannister's army? Asked Sir Brynden after Robb explained the situation to them. On the outskirts of the Golden Tooth. So that must mean at least 10 to 12 days march from there to Harrenhal. That's where they are heading. To join with Tywin Lannister and regroup before marching to confront us, said Robb. How can you be certain? Edmure asked. Because that's what I would do, Uncle, said Robb. So, what do we do, Your Grace? Asked Sir Brynden. I'll take half of our army and march to confront them before they can join their forces with Tywin, said Robb. Why only half? Harold asked. If Tywin finds out, he could launch an invasion of Riverrun and take it before we could march back just after fighting his cousin, Robb explained. Will Dorne's soldiers take part in this, Your Grace? Prince Oberyn asked eagerly. They will, Prince Oberyn. Lord Harold will take command of our troops at Maidenpool to secure our eastern flank, whilst Lord Edmure and Sir Brynden will hold Riverrun. We'll leave by this afternoon, said Robb. Whilst the others left, Robb told Gendry, bring Lord Karstark. Gendry left and saw the large-bearded old warrior, Rakard Karstark, drinking and eating with his 3 sons, Harry on whom was now a husband and an expectant father, the recently healed Torrhen and the still in pain Eddard. "Ah, my savior," said Harry on. "I'm glad to see that you are healed, Lord Harry on," said Gendry as the two shook hands before he turned to face Harry on's Lord Father. "My Lord Karstark, His Grace wants to speak with you in Lord Tully's solar," he said. Lord Karstark had finished gulping down a full tankard of ale, some of which dribbled down his great beard, before standing up, and grabbing a large chunk of lamb and stuffing it into his mouth. Lord Karstark and Gendry met Robb in his Lord Grandfather's solar, and Robb said, "Lord Karstark, as you are aware, Tywin Lannister has a small army of sellswords roaming around the Riverlands and are raiding, murdering, looting and raping all at will. These so-called brave companions number at least 3,000. I need you and your men to track them down and kill them. And make sure to specially kill that evil monster of a leader, Vargo Hoat." "Aye, your grace." "When will we leave?" "As soon as you can," said Robb. "Very good, your grace." "We'll leave soon after lunch," said the eager and battle-hungry Lord of Carhold. As he left the solar, Gendry asked him, "May I accompany you in the fighting, my lord?" "Ah, got a taste for battle, young Baratheon?" he asked, slapping him on the shoulder. "Aye, my lord, and for killing cowards who murder innocents," he said with conviction. In his time of drinking, feasting and fighting alongside lords, ladies and kings, Gendry had almost lost all his King's Landing accent and words. Speaking fancy from spending time with fancy folk, as he thought of it. "Aye, we'll be glad of your company. All my sons join me now that Torrhen and Eddard are healed." Gendry and Meryn left with the Karstark army that afternoon, alongside Sir Patrek Mallister, Sir Robar Royce and Sir Lucas Blackwood, whom scouted around the lands for traces of the so-called brave companions and their despicable leader, Vargo Hoat. Gendry was keen to fight them after hearing all the unspeakable stories of their atrocities committed across the Riverlands. "I look forward to fighting and killing these evil fucking monsters and stop them from harming innocent and defenseless people." Chapter 30, Chapter 28. Chapter text. Robb 11. "Why do you have to leave so soon after the wedding?" Arianne asked in their chambers. "I must. I can't look my bannermen or their soldiers in the eyes if I cannot fight in battles alongside them, or whilst I stay in safety with my queen," Robb replied. "We've only just been married, Robb," she said as they sat on bed. "I know. I know," he said as he held both of her hands and then said, "If I could, I would stay with you forever. But you need to fight," she finished. "I'm sorry, Ari. I truly am. And I cannot fight them if I think that you're not safe here," he said as she lay down and rested her head on his lap and he ran his hands through her now curled and oiled hair. "I should be there with you. I don't want to be away from you whilst you go," she said as she reached up to stroke his face. "But if we lost?" "You won't lose. You'll never lose." "I know it," she said before she sat up on his lap and pushed him down onto the bed and kissed him hard. "Just promise me that you will be careful and that you'll come back safely to me," she whispered, breaking the kiss. "I promise," he said as he took off his tunic. "Oh, a last fuck before you go off to war?" she asked with her old seductive grin. "Gods, how that drives me mad now. Do you not want to?" "If you're worried about," Robb asked with concern. She cupped his face with both hands and said, "Robb, I'm not unwell. And I'd rather die than let us not fuck anymore," before she let go of his head and swiftly took off her dress. Eventually, Robb climbed out of bed, tired, but still had plenty of energy and ready for the march. Arianne was looking lovingly at him from bed, taking a few deep breaths before putting her underclothes back on. "I love you, Ari. So much," he said as he bent down to kiss her. "I love you too. Now remember what you promised," she said holding his face before kissing him. "I do remember and I will not forget." "Good, now go. Otherwise, I'll pull you into bed again and demand another wolf kiss," she said with a smile. Robb dressed in furs and armor and said his farewells to Mother, Sansa, Harold, Gendry, Edmure and Arianne in the courtyard. Robb climbed onto his horse and looked across to see Arianne looking at him with worry. "Gods, I love her so much that I want to bring her with me," he thought as he waved at her. She waved back before he turned to ride out of the courtyard. Staying with Arianne were her cousins, the eldest of the Sand Snakes, an unofficial Queensguard, as Prince Oberyn termed it. Rob had also left one of his best fighters and members of his battle guard, Lady Daisy Mormont, to protect Ariane. A she-bear, just like her mother, the Lady of Bear Island. Rob left Riverrun with an army of 24,000 soldiers, the 10,000 Dornish, 6,000 Northerners, 5,000 Valiman and 3,000 Rivermen. He had sent Sir Jasper far ahead to scout for where they would camp once they had passed the lands of the Golden Tooth. It was 12 days before Sir Jasper rode to tell Rob at their camp, "Your Grace, Stafford Lannister and his army are aware that we are marching to face them." They marched towards Lord Piper's seat of Pink Maiden. But at a slow pace, with servants, camp followers and supplies inside of a large camp train going on 4 miles that is weighing them down and slowing their progress. Right now, they are camped at Sheera. He wants to take it so that he and his men will have a safe and fortified castle to rest if things go badly for them, said Oberyn. As I would in his place, said Rob. So, what's the plan, Your Grace? Asked Bronze Yohn Royce. From what Sir Jasper has said, their army and its servants and followers consist of an enormous camp train, going on 4 miles, and is split into 8 separate camps, but not too far from each other in case of an attack. We will offer them battle before they can be ready. And once they march out, we attack before they can get into formation. We will need to lure them out and then attack, Rob said before explaining his full plan. Later that day, soon after a quick lunch, Rob ordered for the army to split into 8. Rob led the first whilst the rest were led by Prince Oberyn, Bronze Yohn, Great Jon Umber, Harmon Euler, Franklin Fowler, Meja Sewin and Jason Mallister. Prince Oberyn, you will attack Stafford Lannister's camp itself and make sure that he thinks you're leading our whole army to attack him. That will force him to take the bait and signal for all his armies to join. And then we attack as all armies leave their campsites, Rob explained. Though Rob knew that they had more troops than they did, he was confident with surprise on their side, he could win the battle without risking the lives of so many of his own soldiers. Rob gave some large chunks of meat to Grey Wind, who quickly ate them, and Rob hugged Grey Wind and kissed him on his forehead a few times before saying, "Time for battle, my friend." Grey Wind was now a fully grown direwolf and was as large as a fully grown horse and had fangs as long as daggers. He climbed onto his horse and was passed ice by Oliver. This was the first time that he would take this Valyrian steel greatsword into battle. "There's nothing I would love more than to chop Joffrey's head off with this. But first, I must fight the armies of his grandfather. I will avenge father and mother's people. I will end the tyranny of the Lannisters and bring a lasting peace to Westeros." Rob led 4,000 men to the second campsite, large and fortified, just like when he fought Jaime Lannister at the Battle of Riverrun. Rob and his force stood on a hill almost overlooking the campsite, based near a river, but they at the campsite couldn't see them. Then came a loud blow of a horn from the distance. "The enemy scouts. They think they've found our army. They are taking the bait." Rob watched as the force of some 5,000 marched out of the campsite and were led by a lord in heavy plate armor, with the sigil of a brindled boar on a brown field embroidered on the front. Lord Roland Crickehall, Rob realized. He led his men outside of the campsite. Rob didn't draw ice until he saw all of the army outside of it. "Now, Your Grace?" asked Oliver, holding the banner of House Stark. Rob turned to him and said, "I." "Now." Oliver waved the banner and Rob held ice up high for all to see and shouted, "Winter is coming." Grey Wind howled long and loud with Rob. "Winter is coming," shouted his army, and Rob roared long and loud as he rode down the hill towards Roland Crickehall and his army. Grey Wind growled ferociously before running alongside Rob and charging at them. Immediately recognizing the danger that they were in, the Lord of Crickehall Castle tried to reorganize his army. "Form up! Form up! Shields and spears! Shields and spears!" shouted Lord Crickehall before Rob came closer and raised ice above his head and cut down on the Lord of Crickehall Castle. He collapsed from his horse just as Grey Wind leaped up and bit into a knight. Both fell to the other side as the knight screamed as Grey Wind tore his throat open. Rob stabbed a knight as he tried to blow a horn. Rob raised ice at a spearman. He cut down as the spearman raised his badly built shield. The shield broke in half from the blow, and the blow cut down, cutting through his body from his shoulder to his belly. A knight came riding towards Rob with a lance. Rob drew his dagger and threw it at his horse's head. The horse died before it collapsed to the ground and the knight was thrown from his saddle. He stood up and charged towards Rob, screaming for Crickehall. Rob blocked the blow with ice before kicking his helmeted head and then slicing down on his helmet, cutting into his skull, brains and blood spilling out as Rob drew ice from out of his head. A crossbowman was aiming at Rob. Before Rob could react, he realized that he had already fired. Rob looked down and saw that the bolt had just glanced off of his armor, leaving a small scratch before Rob sliced across at a man with a large axe, slicing his head off. 3 more knights came riding towards Rob, one with a mace, another with a sword and a third with a lance. The lancer came towards Rob first. Rob cut ice down onto the lance before it could either unhorse Rob or impale him. Then the sword wielder came towards Rob. Rob thrust at him, cutting heavily through his breastplate, but still he lived, for the Valyrian steel sword cut through the side of his armor. As Rob pulled back, the knight sliced across at him. Rob grabbed his sword hand with his other hand whilst he swung ice around, cutting him down. Both the lancer, who now had a sword, and the mace wielder now rode towards him. Rob sliced at the lancer, who fell from his horse when his throat was slit by ice. The mace wielder managed to block Rob's strong blow with his shield before smashing his mace onto ice. Rob pulled ice back and smashed ice onto his mace. The mace broke into pieces from the blow, and Rob swung ice around, eviscerating him from his right shoulder to his left hip. Rob pulled ice out of his hip and as the knight fell from his horse, Rob cut down on another spearman, just as his infantry joined the fight. This spearman had tried to stab his horse. Rob's blow cut his spear in half and cut his leg open. He collapsed to the ground, screaming as Rob climbed off his horse and stabbed and sliced 5 more soldiers before the fighting was over. The remaining Lannister soldiers, a few hundred standing, lay down their weapons and surrendered, terrified of the growling of Grey Wind as he stalked around them, blood dripping down from his mouth and bits of a man's guts hanging from his fangs. Rob accepted their surrender and sent some horsemen to find out the progress of the rest of the battle as his men went into the Lannister campsite to loot what they wanted and feasted on the food and drink that had been left behind. All whilst Rob sat by the river, cleaning ice. If only there was a weirwood tree here. How I need to see one. I need to pray at one. I hate being far away from a godswood, I need to look to the old gods for their guidance. Your Grace, Sir Andor Royce Oliver announced. Rob nodded and stood up, whilst sheathing ice as the eldest son of Bronze Yohn and heir to Rune Estone walked down the embankment, with blooded armor and a half-dented helmet. Your Grace, the enemy forces are all defeated. At least 8,000 of their soldiers and knights have surrendered. A dozen or so nobles have been taken prisoner, he said after bowing. And what of Stafford Lannister? Rob asked. Dead, Your Grace. Prince Oberyn speared him as he tried to run for his horse, he explained. Very good. Thank you, Sir Andor. It's done. Tywin Lannister, you're running out of armies from the Westerlands. Where will you look to for soldiers now? Sellsword armies from Essos? Or will you murder Renly and arrange a betrothal between Margaery Tyrell and your despicable grandson to gain the armies of the Reach? Or was it through your doing that Balon Greyjoy invaded the north? What are you doing now? Rob wondered as he looked at the distance at nothing. Harold 11. Harold was sitting with Sansa and Lady Stark, his now good mother, in his and Sansa's chambers when there was a knock on the door. Enter, said Sansa. It was Ed Muir. Great news, he said. Rob has triumphed over Stafford Lannister's army. Catelyn asked. Yes, he has. Stafford himself is dead and they march back to Riverrun, he said with excitement before leaving. We are winning the war. And soon we can go home to the Eyrie, said Sansa. Yes, that is my dream. I'll be so happy for us and our children to be there and for us all to be a good and happy family when all of this is over. Harold was very happy with Sansa and loved her more than he had ever loved jousting, tourneys or adventure. She was everything and more than he could ever have hoped for in a wife. He and Sansa walked together around the river on Godswood. It's so peaceful here. Do you worship the old gods, Harry? Sansa asked. Only she calls me Harry. Not even Rob or Gendry call me that. I worship them and the Seven. Growing up, I always wanted someone to talk to, and though I was brought up going to septs, I have always enjoyed walking around the Godswood in the hills of the Eyrie. It just gives me a feeling of inner peace that I can't quite explain, he replied. I feel the same. I was brought up learning about the Seven from Mother, my Septa Mordane, and from Maester Luwin. Father always told me about the old gods, she replied. It sounds like a wonderful childhood, said Harold. It was. It always was, despite my siblings being very different, she replied with a grin. Well, I've already met Rob. And John is like Rob. Arya is more wolf than anything else. Bran likes to climb. And Rickon likes to play with Shaggy. Is that all, correct, he said, remembering all that Rob told him. Yes, that's all true. I just want for us all to be back together again. All 6 of us haven't been together ever since Arya left with Father for King's Landing and John left for the Wall, she said, her smile turning to a sad frown. Once this war is over, I'm sure John can spare a day to come to Winterfell, and for you, Rob, Bran and Rickon to be back at Winterfell, Harold said as he put his arm gently around Sansa's shoulder. And Arya will be back. If she's anything like Rob said she was, and with Nymeria at her side, there's nothing that will frighten her or get in her way, Harold continued. She nodded and said, I'm sorry, Harry. I just miss my family, before hugging him. You are lucky to have had a family. I only had my parents and they died before I turned 10, just as I had become a squire. You are lucky to have brothers and sisters. I wished I had them growing up and not to feel alone. Sansa, my love, you shouldn't say sorry. We are husband and wife now. We are family. I must shoulder your burdens and worries, just as you have to put up with mine. And if there's one thing I've learned from my time with Rob, it's that you Starks are hard to kill and that only a fool would dare to make an enemy of one. Your family will reunite. Of that I'm certain. And when this is all over, we will have our own family in the Eyrie and it'll never ever be far from Winterfell, he said gently. They broke the hug and she smiled and said, thank you, Harry. Harold gently kissed her on the forehead as she lay her head on his lap and they relaxed on a tree stump before a weirwood tree. On their wedding night, Harold had told her, we don't have to do this tonight if you don't want to. I don't want to put you through this if you're not ready. No, I'm ready. For you, I will, she said confidently. And so, he was gentle with her, in spite of him being able to just hear the amorous moans and lustful screams of Rob and Arianne from the nearby chamber. Not now, you filthy whores, he wanted to shout at them. The morning after their wedding, they had made love again before sharing a bath and leaving for breakfast. And as they left their chambers, Rob and Arianne left their chambers. They looked as though they had been having too much fun, and Arianne had trouble walking. I wonder how many children those two will have if their vigor keeps up in bed. Soon after leaving the Godswood, they had lunch with Catelyn, Edmure, Roslyn and Brynden. Lady Roslyn, a message for you from the twins, said Maester Vimen. Roslyn opened the letter. Her eyes opened wide when she read it. Is everything okay, Roslyn? Edmure worriedly asked as he held her hand. My Lord Father has been murdered, she said. The late Lord Walder Free has been murdered. I thought that old and creepy lecher would never die. Murdered, my lady? By Ironborn or Lannisters? Sir Brynden asked. No, by his wife. She castrated him and left him to bleed to death before killing herself, she said, looking up from the letter. So now Sir Stephen is Lord of the Twins, and he'll expel all of those who aren't his children, grandchildren or great-grandchildren. That'll probably cause a lot of infighting amongst the Freys and free bastards of the Twins. It won't be so crowded there now, at least. Though many places across the Riverlands will be getting unwelcome Freys as guests, I'm sure. Shall we take you back to the Twins for the funeral, my lady? Harold asked politely. Yes, yes. Thank you. I'm sorry if this is a burden to you both, she said politely. Harold could see it in her eyes as she said it. Her father doesn't mean anything to her at all. How could he? He probably was horrible to her mother and used all his children as ways to increase his house's standing in the world. He used his children and grandchildren as currency to be exchanged. How could anyone, even his own children and grandchildren, love such a cruel man? My lady, you are my aunt. And we would be honored to take you back there on our way to Winterfell, Sansa said sweetly. Harold had decided to accompany Sansa and Catelyn to Winterfell, simply to see the great city and keep and where Rob and Sansa grew up and to meet Bran and Rickon. He had left Lord Horton Redfort in command of their forces at Maidenpool. And once Sansa had finished saying goodbye to her brothers and was ready to leave Winterfell, they would then go to the Eyrie. Tyrion 11. Tyrion was watching from the Tower of the Hand as Joffrey was using his crossbow on targets with various great houses' flags on them. The direwolf of the Starks. The falcon of the Arryns. The fish of the Tullys. The spear-pierced son of the Martells. The crowned stag of the Baratheons. And the personal sigil of Stannis, a crowned stag and a flaming heart. Ah, yes, keeping shooting at them, your grace, and maybe, just maybe, some crossbow bolts may magically kill the men of those families who fight against your rule, Tyrion thought as Bronn joined him in the Tower of the Hand. Nice and fancy up there, Bronn said, looking around. Pardrick, bring us some wine, said Tyrion to his squire, Pardrick Payne, cousin of Sir Ilyn Payne. How is my brother's sword skill getting on? Tyrion asked, knowing that Jaime had been retraining with Bronn, having been stuck in a Riverrun prison cell for nearly 2 moons, and his arm was still healing the wounds sustained from Robb Stark's wolf Grey Wind. Oh, he's improving. That wolf bit him bad, he was lucky that he was wearing armor. But there should be plenty of time before either of Robert's brothers or Robb Stark come to King's Landing, he said as Tyrion looked up from letters. What have you got there? He asked. Correspondence. My spies are telling me that Renly's army is marching out of the Stormlands and are now in the Reach's borders with the Crown Lands, but Renly himself is leading a few hundred men towards Maidenpool, he said. Negotiating with Robb Stark, suggested Bronn. Maybe. Renly thinks he will be the best king out of all of the contenders for the Iron Throne. And from what I've read, he was very annoyed when Robb Stark announced his intentions to claim the throne. So, what? Will he try and throw his whole fucking army at Robb Stark and think that he'll win? Bronn asked. Knowing Renly, he'll probably have his favorite knight lead any glorious charge, and his good father Mace Tyrell will probably try to sweet-talk him into giving the command to him. Renly is no soldier, nor is he a knight or a leader on the battlefield. He thinks that from his time in King's Landing, that the people love him. And they do. The people of King's Landing anyway. But he misinterprets that as though all of the 7 kingdoms love him, nobles, knights and small folk, the whole fucking lot. And he'll promise anything to guarantee himself more supporters and allies. When he was Master of Laws, he spent more time throwing parties for the small folk than actually helping them, bringing order to the streets or getting rid of the likes of Janos Slynt, Tyrion explained. What about Stannis? Bronn asked as Pardrick brought them both some wine. Stannis forgets that not everyone in the kingdoms is as honorable as he is, and it seems as though his belief in his newfound religion is dishonest. The only dishonest thing about him, Tyrion said. Dishonest? Does he just use it to further his own purposes to becoming king? Bronn asked as he quickly drank from his wine cup. Yes. He never struck me as a religious person. Not when we were on the small council together, and certainly not now. Though he has fewer numbers than either his younger brother or Robb Stark, he has more ships and is experienced enough in war to know how to plan a successful siege. He knows more about sieges than most people. He preferred starving for a year in Storm's End to surrender whilst the entire Tyrell army surrounded him in Robert's rebellion, Tyrion explained as he sipped his wine. So, if the city is attacked, what can your father do? He could lead a counterattack and crush any besieger who comes. But he risks running into Robb Stark if he does that. And Robb Stark has shown that he knows that he can't take King's Landing without defeating Father first, Tyrion replied. Wars are fucking confusing when you're planning them. It's much fucking simpler to fight in them, Bronn said. I for one like to plan. I like to use my mind rather than my hands for victory, Tyrion said as he finished his wine. Except when you're fucking Shae, said Bronn. Oh, are you jealous, sellsword? Would you rather be fucking her, or do you want me to fuck you? Tyrion jested. Bronn scoffed and said, fuck you, dwarf. That's Shae's job. Your job is simple, just like you would want it. To kill people, Tyrion said. There was a knock on the door. Enter, said Tyrion. Pardrick opened the door, and there was Jaime. Ah, my star pupil. Are you feeling up for a rematch? Bronn asked. Not right now, sellsword. Tyrion, I talked to Lancel, he said, his face turning red and angry. And, Tyrion said, gesturing for his brother to continue. She trying to prove that she's not a brother fucker by fucking her cousin along with other men and women? Bronn asked. More of this, and you'll be performing alongside Moonboy and without any balls. How did you know? Jaime asked, ignoring Bron's sarcasm. He came to my chambers a few times, stinking of lavender oil, and when I confronted him, he spilled it all. He replied, best I don't mention Varys. Jaime doesn't like that eunuch. But there are more important things to worry about, or rather, be grateful for, said Tyrion. What? Has father fished an army out of the water now that Uncle Stafford and his army are all dead? Jaime asked, frustrated. The news of the Battle of Shire was badly received. Whilst Cersei was frustratingly sending ravens to father to demand for action and for something to be done, Tyrion had decided to send ravens across the narrow sea and enquire to sell sword armies if they would serve them. Joffrey, on the other hand, was furious, and when he saw Tyrion after hearing news of the defeat, said, why did you release those northerners? I could have killed them to send a message to Robb Stark. And what good would that have done? Encourage him to cut off your Uncle Jaime's head, you damned half-wit. No, but it seems that Renly hasn't taken kindly to Robb Stark claiming the throne for himself and is leading his army out of the Stormlands and are at Blackwater Bush. But Renly himself is leading a few hundred men towards the Riverlands. Whether he thinks he can take on Robb Stark and his entire army with just a few hundred, or whether he wants to negotiate, is anyone's guess, Tyrion said. He told the same news when they attended the small council. Will Renly and Robb Stark fight each other? Davin asked, who was still saddened by the death of his father, Stafford. I know not. But, for now, it looks as though Renly is going to negotiate with Robb Stark at Maidenpool. What happens there, we would have to wait and hear about it. Unfortunately, any assassins we send to kill them, they'd be gone by the time that they got there, said Tyrion. Hopefully they will fight each other. And possibly even kill each other, leaving only Stannis to fight, said Cersei. Such a battle would result in Robb Stark being the victor. He has battle-hardened soldiers and commanders, and he knows more about battles and war than Renly could ever hope to. And, if he needs to, he can call for reinforcements from the Riverlands, the Vale or Dorne. There will be thousands ready to join for glory, said Jaime. Why not from the north? Asked Cersei. The Ironborn are invading the north. Balon Greyjoy has crowned himself king of the Iron Islands again. Robb Stark has sent Roose Bolton to the north to lead the counterattack. And I did send a raven to Balon Greyjoy in the hopes for an alliance. But he said that in exchange for an alliance, the Greyjoys would add the north to their own lands and that we would recognize him as the independent king of the Iron Islands and of the north, said Tyrion. What is the north but a grey wasteland that savages call home? Asked Cersei with a scoff. Savages that have crushed 3 of father's armies, took me prisoner and have father trapped inside Harrenhal. Jaime replied sternly to Cersei. In all of Tyrion's life, he had never seen Jaime so angry at Cersei. He had seen her angry at Jaime, but never had Jaime ever been angry at Cersei like this before. Cersei was shocked and her mouth was wide open in surprise before Tyrion broke the awkward silence. If Robb and Renly do fight, and the Northerners kill Renly, then the Tyrells may join us. If we could betroth Margaery Tyrell to Joffrey, would they accept this, Lord Hand? Asked Varys. The Tyrells have one thing and one thing only on their minds: growing strong. And they will achieve that by having Mace Tyrell's prized daughter wed any potential king. If Renly should die, then, Robb could very ensure his very own defeat, Tyrion suggested. If, and only if, it does come to battle between them, Jaime pointed out. Renly is an overconfident man. He thinks that his army, numbering 100,000 now, will easily destroy Robb Stark, whose army number a little less than 70,000, said Tyrion. Chapter 31, Chapter 29. Chapter text. Arianne 11. Arianne was escorted by Daisy Mormont, Oberyn, Nymeria and Tywin to Maester Vimen Solar. She had felt unwell for the last 2 days. Have you not drunk any Moontea in the last few weeks? Tywin asked. I've not drunk any Moontea since we left Sunspear, said Arianne. Could our queen be with child already? A little wolf. Nearly 3 weeks after her wedding day. Nymeria asked teasingly. We've fucked before that, Arianne admitted. When? Oberyn asked. On the night that your father told Robb that he should be king. Nearly 5 weeks ago. Both nights were very enjoyable, said Arianne with a grin. Well, Do you plan on sharing him, cousin? I heard the way you screamed on your wedding night. I've never heard you scream like that before. Maybe he can give each of us a, what does he call it? Oh, yes, the wolf's kiss, said Nymeria cheekily, whilst Tyen giggled evilly. He's my husband, you bastards. A few years ago, maybe. But not anymore. He's mine and I'm his. I'm not sharing him with anybody, not even you, said Arianne. Maybe you can learn what the wolf's kiss is from Theon Greyjoy. Daisy Mormont meanwhile looked with puzzlement and raised eyebrows at the 4 Dornish women with her, as if she was thinking, why are all Dornish so hungry for the next fuck? Oberyn turned her gaze to her and she pulled a seductive grin. Oberyn was the biggest and strongest woman Arianne knew, until she had met Daisy Mormont. It's not often that Oberyn meets women as big or as strong as she. Have you ever been with a woman in Bear Island, Daisy? Oberyn asked. No, I haven't, she replied, blushing a little as she said it. Have my cousins broken through to the tough she-bear? Well, maybe tonight we could show you many things that our queen would never let us share with our king, said Nymeria as she ran her hand across Daisy's cheek. You're almost as bad as the free men who tried to propose to me, she said. Did you accept any of them? Tyen asked. I told them that I would only accept a proposal from a man if he could beat me in a fight. None have succeeded, she replied proudly and confidently. Arianne's cousins seemed to think this a challenge. Tyen grinned as she looked Daisy up and down and said, ooh. I'm beginning to like you, Daisy. Well, how about this? Each of us fight you, and if one of us wins, then she takes you to bed, Oberyn suggested. Arianne couldn't help but laugh at how her cousins were turning to their next target now that Arianne had forbidden them from trying to get her to share Robb with them. Robb is mine and not even my cousins will have him in bed. Daisy looked relieved when they arrived at Maester Vimon's Solar. She knocked. Who is it? He asked. Daisy Mormont, Maester. It's the Queen, she feels ill, she replied. Enter, he said. Arianne went inside whilst her cousins and her guard waited outside. Arianne sat on his table whilst he examined her. Describe how you feel, Your Grace, he said. Random bouts of sickness and my head sometimes feels as though it will explode, she said. His eyebrows raised and he looked around and he turned to his bookshelf. He walked towards it and found the book that he seemed to have been looking for. And what about your breasts, Your Grace? Do they feel sore in pain? He asked when reading a section of his book. A little, Arianne replied, wondering if this was a sign that she was with child or if her breasts still felt sore from the last time that she was with Robb. And have you felt a slight metallic sort of taste at all? He asked. A few times, she replied. He nodded as though this was all of the answers he needed. You need not fear, Your Grace. You are not ill. You are with child, he said with a warm smile. I am with child. My first child. Robb has to come home for this. He needs to know. I can't tell him through a letter. I have to tell it to him face to face. Thank you, Maester, she said before she left and met her cousins and guard, whom looked amused in an embarrassed way with how her cousins were flirting with her. With such big muscles, you must have big tits and an even bigger ass, hiding under all of that uncomfortable chainmail, said Nymeria as she walked around Daisy and hungrily looked her up and down. Cousin, are you all right? Tyen asked sweetly. Daisy looked relieved for the attention to be on her queen rather than on her. I am with child, she said with excitement. Her cousins cheered and hugged her. If it's a girl, will she be heir to the Iron Throne? Will you convince Robb to change the law so that women can inherit? Oberyn asked. I will, even if it is a son, Arianne said as she rested both of her hands on her belly. My little child is growing. Whether a boy or a girl, they will be a sun-kissed wolf. Catelyn 11. Catelyn and Harold had returned to Riverrun just in time for Robb's return from the victory at the Battle of Sheera. Their return had been slowed down by bringing with them supplies and loot taken from the Lannister army. They had also brought prisoners with them. All nobles were put in Riverrun's prisons whilst most of the common soldiers were either sent to the wall or given the choice of fighting for Robb or doing labor for repairing looted and damaged castles, cities, towns and villages. Most chose the latter too, but some had chosen to go to the wall. Most made the choice to be free of the vows of the Night's Watch, Catelyn thought when she saw those who were laboring. Caitlin and Harold had said goodbye to Sansa and to Septa Mordane as they left for the Eastern Road with a contingent of 500 Vale and Northern soldiers. Caitlin could see it on Harold's face as he waved goodbye to Sansa and looked at her even when she was so far away. He truly does love her. She told me that she loves him in Winterfell. Caitlyn's marriage with Ned Stark wasn't like Sansa's marriage or Robb's marriage. Robb and Sansa had fallen in love with their spouses almost instantly. Caitlyn's love with Ned was built up slowly, brick by brick, as she had explained it to a curious Robb when he was sulking about his now-defunct betrothal to Myrcella Baratheon. And it was on Caitlin and Harold's return from Winterfell that they met Arianne. "I am with child," she said with a great beaming smile when they met her in her and Robb's chambers. "Congratulations," Harold said with a hug. "This soon?" Caitlin asked. But then she saw the unashamed look on her good daughter's face. Weeks before their wedding day. Was it on the day that they found out that they would be wed? "Cat. Robb is arriving," Edmure shouted from across the hallway. Arianne suddenly stood up, overexcited to greet her husband. "Calm down, Arianne. For an expectant mother, you will need to take it slowly and gently. I will help you on these coming moons, for the gods know that you will need as much help as you can," Caitlin said. "Thank you, Lady Stark," she said. They walked outside to the courtyard, where Robb climbed off of his horse and saw Arianne standing there. The first thing he did upon dismounting from his horse was to hug Arianne and kiss her. "I love you," he whispered before breaking from the hug. "I love you too. And so does our child," she said before placing his hands on her belly. "You? Are you sure?" he asked, clearly surprised. "I am." "Robb, that's your first child," she said with a beaming smile before kissing him and hugging him again. Robb looked exhilarated as he greeted Caitlin and Harold. "I felt the same feeling of exhilaration when I was carrying Robb, and sent a letter to Ned. Only to see him return home with Jon Snow," she thought. "But Robb and Arianne love each other too much to turn from their marriage and lay with others. What supplies have you brought?" Harold asked as he, Robb, Uncle Brynden, Edmure, Arianne, Caitlin and Oberyn met in Caitlin's Lord Father's solar. "Food, supplies, weapons and horses. And enough gold and silver to split around the whole army and keep them satisfied until the next battle," said Robb. "What about casualties?" Edmure asked. 1,500 of ours are dead and another 4,000 are wounded," Robb replied. "What other news is there?" Robb asked. "Renly and his army have left Storm's End. They are marching out of the Stormlands. What they do now, we don't know yet. And another 3,000 reinforcements have arrived, from the Vale and from Dorne," said Edmure. "What of the twins? What's going on there?" asked Robb. "Stephen Free has returned home and has solidified his rule of the twins, but has begun to expel most of his brothers and sisters and their families, making certain that only his branch of the family rules the twins. Though there has been some infighting and a lot of Freys and Free bastards have been killed. Thankfully, the most unpleasant of them are the ones who have been killed," said Edmure. "I don't know whether the late Lord Free would be either angry or amused to see what is going on," Caitlin thought. "And what of Lord Bolton's fight against the Greyjoys?" Robb asked. "We met him, his son Domeric and Darin Hornwood just as we arrived at Winterfell. Lord Bolton has mustered up 12,000 soldiers and have already pushed back most of the Ironborn raiding forces and armies and has sent Alysanne Mormont to capture their unguarded ships on the coast to prevent their escape. Howland Reed and his Crannog men slaughtered a small army that tried to take Moat Cailin. Lord Reed himself killed Balon Greyjoy's best raider, Dagmar Clefture. There is a raiding force of 8,000 attacking Torrens Square in the hopes of capturing it. They are led by Balon Greyjoy's brother, Victorian Greyjoy. Benfred Tallheart and Cleesewin are holding Torrens Square with 400 men, but they are outnumbered and running low on supplies," explained Caitlin. "All whilst Theon has been defying his father's commands by raiding the Westerlands and even attacking Lannisport after capturing Westerland merchant ships and sailing into Lannisport disguised before raiding the city and looting it," Caitlin remembered from the last raven from him. There was a knock on the door. "Enter," said Robb. It was Nestor Royce. "I beg your pardon, your grace." "My lords." "My lady." "Renly Baratheon is leading a few hundred men towards Maidenpool whilst his army is camped at Blackwater Bush," he said. Renly wouldn't make such a risk if he didn't think that he could benefit from coming up this far north of the Reach and into the Riverlands, said Harold. Well, whatever his intentions, we will go out to meet with him, said Robb. Robb left with Catelyn, Harold, Edmure, Uncle Brynden and Prince Oberyn and a contingent of 300 knights and riders from the north, the Riverlands, the Vale and Dawn. They arrived on the outskirts of Maidenpool, a city popular for traders, and the seat of House Mouton. Lord William Mouton welcomed them into his castle for the night. And the next day, they rode out to meet Renly and his contingent on the fields. Catelyn looked at Renly and his force. One thing that she noticed about Renly's force was the way that the knights, outriders and lords carried themselves on their horses, as though they were living in an epic song of valor inside their heads. None in Robb's entourage did such a thing, for they were all hardened by battle and had endured the hardships of war. She saw Renly accompanied by 7 knights in beautiful armor and war cloaks of multiple colors. Renly's Rainbow Guard, as opposed to the King's Guard, she thought as she recognized Loras Tyrell as the commander, riding close by his king. Catelyn was surprised when she saw, perhaps the tallest woman she had ever seen, dressed as a knight of the Rainbow Guard. She must have a story to tell. Though I think she must face ridicule and scorn for choosing to be a knight rather than a lady. She should have been born a Mormont. Renly wore beautiful armor, colored green and gold, but it looked more beautiful than it looked strong, and he wore a crown decorated with golden stag antlers. His armor had no cuts or dents on it, in comparison to the armor of Robb, Harold, Edmure, Uncle Brynden and Prince Oberyn, in fact all of the knights accompanying them. Accompanying Renly were various Stormlords and Reclords. She saw his good father, Lord Mace Tyrell, amongst them, alongside Randyll Tarly, Baelor Hightower and Mathis Rowan. Of the Reclords, she knew that only Randyll Tarly was a great warrior and had won victories in Robert's rebellion against Robert and had fought bravely in the Greyjoy rebellion. Paxter Redwyne, another great warrior of the Reach, was not among their number because both of his sons were being held hostage in King's Landing. As he rode forwards to greet them, Robb unsheathed ice, gleaming in the sunlight, from his saddle. Renly looked worried as his horse reared slightly and Nate and his Rainbow Guard reached for their swords before Robb handed ice and his dagger to his squire Oliver before riding further to the middle ground. The Rainbow Guard relaxed and Renly did the same and handed his sword, which looked beautiful but ornamental, to his own squire before he rode to meet Robb. Robb Stark, you have achieved a great many things since we last met, said Renly with a charming and dazzling smile. Whereas you've achieved nothing, thought Catelyn. But here we are. And yet, with your army all the way in the Reach and you taking a great risk to come up here, Renly, I cannot help but wonder, why? Robb asked. It wasn't unnoticeable how Renly and many of his entourage looked annoyed at how Robb addressed Renly by his name and not as your grace. He's simply giving him the same respect that your own king is giving him. Why indeed? Well, I had hoped to convince you to put aside your foolish ambitions to be king. I'd like to think that I know you well enough, Robb. I know that you are like your father and that you do not wish to become king. So, I guess I could ask of you the same question. Why? Why would you want to crown yourself king? Renly asked. At which Robb drew a letter from his horse's saddlebag. Do you recognize this? It's the very same letter you gave to your nephew to bring to me. Ah, how is Gendry? He asked. A great warrior, like his father. Who is right now protecting innocent people from harmed and murdered by sellswords hired by Tywin Lannister. He's more a knight of chivalry and honor than any I ever met, said Robb. Renly nodded with a smile at hearing about his nephew. So, what is this about that letter? One would almost think from the letter that you thought that we were marching on your behalf simply to distract Tywin Lannister long enough so that you could take King's Landing and crown yourself king, and that our intentions were not to free my father from Joffrey or to free the Riverlands from the attacks of Tywin and Jaime Lannister, said Robb before he put the letter back into his horse's saddlebag. Catelyn looked at the lords of the Stormlands and the Reach. Only Randyll Tarly and Mathis Rowan looked visibly disappointed in Renly's actions regarding the letter. Whilst Prince Oberyn and Uncle Brynden snorted. It was never my intention to cause offense. But, I'm here now. Surely, we can put aside these differences and join our armies together to defeat Tywin once and for all and take King's Landing and avenge your father, said Renly. And so that you can be crowned king. You who could have come here to defend the Riverlands from the Lannisters when you had an army in the tens of thousands. What was the point of gathering an enormous army if your only intention was to attack King's Landing with it? Let's be clear, Renly. I didn't want to be king, but the Lords of the North, the Riverlands, the Vale and Dawn offered it to me, said Robb. Bear this in mind, Robb. I will take King's Landing and be crowned king, and I will have the popular support from the people and from the nobility of all kingdoms. And then I'll defeat my brother Stannis. And when I do, I will give you one last chance to declare your fealty to me. Otherwise, there will be more war, said Renly. All kingdoms. I'd love to see you try to get the small folk and nobility of the north on your side. The likes of the great Jon Umber, Mage Mormont and Ricard Karstark would laugh at you. Who knows? You may even get an amused grin from Roose Bolton. As for the Riverlords, the proud lords, ladies and people of the Riverlands will never back you due to your inaction when the Lannisters raided, burned and slaughtered my people. But Robb just laughed at his statement. Renly looked surprised, as did his companions. First I insult you, and now I amuse you. You do. You've never fought a war or a battle. And most of your army are green men and boys who know nothing of war or the price one must pay for such victories, said Robb. How dare you? He is your king, shouted a furious Mace Tyrell. Robb faced him as the overweight Lord of Highgarden drew his sword. What in the seven hells are you doing, Tyrell? Robb isn't going to take him seriously. And Renly isn't our king, we've sworn no oath of fealty to him. Lord Tyrell, put that back in its scabbard before you hurt yourself. Here I am, an unarmed man, and you would threaten to kill me during a peaceful negotiation. Is that supposed to be common hospitality in negotiations in the Reach, said Robb menacingly whilst he held up his empty hands to emphasize that he was no threat. Even unarmed, he could still kill Renly and Mace Tyrell without much effort. Catelyn noticed how a few Stormlords and Reeclords looked admiringly at Robb. Randyll Tarly, reportedly a hard man to impress and one who only respected strength, did look impressed at Robb. Just as Robb had finished, Grey Wind loyally appeared by Robb's side and started to growl at Mace Tyrell. The Rainbow Guard looked surprised at seeing Grey Wind and looked unsure of what to do. Mace Tyrell's face turned white as he sheathed his sword when faced down by the horse-sized direwolf whose fangs were longer than daggers. They have all likely heard the stories of Robb and Grey Wind fighting side by side and Grey Wind slaughtering horses, soldiers and knights and returning to Robb's side covered in blood. As he sheathed it, Grey Wind stopped growling and lay down on the grass. Many in Robb's entourage laughed. Now is not the time for laughing, or whilst Cersei Lannister laughs at us pointlessly bickering, Catelyn thought. Mace Tyrell rode to join his goodson, probably so that he can feel important, though he looked nervously at Grey Wind. And as he did, so did Harold, Edmure and Oberyn rode towards Robb's side. Lord Arryn, Lord Tully and Prince Oberyn. I am surprised that you would all join on a northerner's side to be king, especially when he has no true claim to the Iron Throne, said Renly. Neither do you. You are Robert's youngest brother. Was that supposed to be a diplomatic way forward or an insult? Robb asked. Neither, I'm simply surprised that they would choose to back a man who worships the old gods and has no true wish to be king, he explained. As Renly spoke, Mace Tyrell looked angrily at Oberyn. Mace Tyrell had sent his eldest son, Willers, to a tourney when he was only a squire at 18, and he remained badly injured in his leg from a joust with the Red Viper and needed to use a crutch when walking. Yet another reason why the Tyrells and the Martells were at odds, in spite of the friendship that had developed between Oberyn Martell and Willers Tyrell. And why would they support you when you've not supported House Tully or the Riverlands? Are all south of Moat Cailin supposed to support Southerners to be king, whenever they want it? This isn't about faith or where you think that a king should come from. I side with my nephew and my king, not you, Renly Baratheon. For when all seemed lost, it was my nephew who had saved Riverrun and my country and has since protected his subjects from the Lannisters and from the Ironborn. Can you say the same? Whilst we have been fighting, all you've been doing is eating all the food and drinking all wine of the Stormlands and the Reach while watching men playing at war and holding contests for entrance into your untested Rainbow Guard. And you think that you should be king just because some small folk in King's Landing praise your name for being kind to them, said Edmure, shaking his head with scorn for daring to presume that the Riverlands owed Renly their loyalty. Uncle Brynden, at Catelyn's side, smiled proudly. For the first time that she knew of, he looked impressed with Catelyn's brother. I say the same, Renly. Where were you when the Lannisters were burning and pillaging the Riverlands, conquering castles, slaughtering innocent people and laying siege to Daery and Riverrun? Just waiting until your army was large enough to fill up an entire battlefield and eaten a year's worth of harvest whilst marching from castle to castle and promising glory to green knights and lords and acting as though this is a ceaseless feast and unending tourney and not a war. You know nothing of war or being a lord or even a king. You did nothing to stop corruption from running rampant in King's Landing with the likes of Janos Slynt commanding the Gold Cloaks, nor was it you who arrested Littlefinger. My squire is a boy of 5 and 10 and he's seen more fighting and killing than you and more than half of your army, said Harold. With all of that in mind, why should we side with you over the husband of my niece, whom is a warrior that is honorable, just, strong and wise and is a capable leader, on and off of the battlefield? Oberyn asked. I can answer for him, Prince Oberyn. Renly Baratheon and his companions of the Stormlands and the Reach think we of the North are wildings and savages and that the North is a cold and unpleasant wasteland of snow and ice, Robb said. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think not so horribly of you, of the Northerners or of the North, Robb Stark. I think nothing but the best of all peoples and all kingdoms. And I saw for myself when you were in King's Landing. You don't want to be king, where it's all Southerners and Southern intrigues in every darkened corner, with no honor or justice. Coming from the former Master of Laws, that says a lot of your faith in the laws of the kingdoms. But then again, when you were Master of Laws, you had spent more time bandying jests and insults with Littlefinger than actually doing your job. You are true, I don't want to be king. But when presented with such an offer, at a time when no other claimant to the Iron Throne would protect those they claim to be their subjects, I don't see it as a privilege to be king, a way to be wealthy or powerful, a chance to increase one's family's standing or a method to be used to be remembered in books and in songs. I see it as a burdensome duty that cannot be forsaken or cast aside. In spite of what you or those who follow you believe, I'm no savage or prick obsessed with power and wealth. I only joined this war to free my father and free the Riverlands whilst you drank good wine and ate good food in Storm's End with the Stormlords and the Reclords pledging allegiance to you and gathering their armies. But before anyone else could say anything, a lone horseman rode towards Renly. The Rainbow Guards drew swords. Your Grace. Your Grace, said the messenger to Renly, holding a letter. Sir Gullen, what is it? Renly asked as he met with Sir Gullen. Sir Gullen Tyrell, the second son of Mace Tyrell, and the best fighter of the Reach, better at a mace and a sword than his younger brother Loras, if the stories are to be believed. Your Grace, Stannis besieged Storm's End, he said before passing him the letter. Stannis besieged Storm's End. What will Renly do? March out to defeat him. He must if he doesn't want to lose face in front of his bannermen and in front of Robb. He has drained the Stormlands and the Reach of nearly all of its spare troops that he's left almost none to protect his lands in case of an attack. Has he been taking no counsel from any of his advisers or his bannermen who have seen war? Both Renly and Mace Tyrell read the letter, before Renly faced Robb, who raised his eyebrows at him being taken by surprise like this, whilst Harold chuckled and Edmure snorted. This'll make a funny song for the minstrels to sing. The king who left his back door wide open, Prince Oberyn commented. That could be interpreted in more ways than one, Prince Oberyn, said Harold, at which the two laughed. This isn't over, Stark. When you hear of how I defeat my brother, I want you to remember how I deal with others whom would take away what is rightfully mine. You may think that your bannermen want you to be king, but how long will that last when you sit on the Iron Throne and behave as a king must behave? But it needn't be like this. There is still time to reconsider, Renly said before he and his riders rode away. As they did, Sir Brynden asked as Robb, Harold, Edmure and Oberyn rejoined them, what did that achieve? Not a lot, but it shows how slow and how incompetent Renly is when it comes to war. He says a lot, but he farts more than he threatens. We head back to Riverrun now and wait to hear how Renly's fighting with Stannis ends, said Robb. Chapter 32, Chapter 30. Chapter text. Gendry 11. Lord Karstark led a force of 4,000 men of Karhold in the hunt for Vargo Hoat and the brave companions. Wherever the brave companions had gone, they had left ransacked farms, hamlets, villages and towns in their wake. Very few, if any, had survived these raids. Gendry's absolute hatred for the brave companions only intensified when they came across such a village. Women and girls from as young as 8 to as old as 70 were raped and murdered. Men and boys were either killed on the spot or their hands and feet were amputated and left to bleed to death. It had been 10 entire weeks ever since they had left Riverrun and were sent by Robb to hunt down Vargo Hoat. In Lord Karstark's tent, they were ecstatic to hear of Robb's victory at the Battle of Sheera. Lord Karstark had ordered for a whole day of feasting and drinking in celebration of the victory. "How many armies does that leave Tywin Lannister now, father?" asked Torrhen. "Other than his army in Harrenhal?" "None, I think, unless he sends another of his cousins to Casterly Rock and to bring up a new army," said Lord Karstark. They were camped outside of the city of Solpants, seat of House Cox. The Lord of the Solpants, Sir Quincy Cox, had offered them to stay in the Solpants, but Lord Karstark declined. "If we get word of these bastard brigands, it'll be easier to give chase out here than inside the city." A day after camping on the outskirts of the Solpants, Lord Karstark sent Gendry to find Sir Robar Royce, Sir Lucas Blackwood and Sir Patrek Mallister, whom had been sent scouting. He found them at a forested hill with a steady stream of water. They were letting their horses drink from the stream whilst they sat down and started eating, without a campfire. They were eating bread and apples. Upon hearing a crack of a twig from underneath Falcon's hoof, the three knights drew their swords and stood up, only to see Gendry. "Apologies, sirs," he called out. "Sir Gendry," called Sir Patrek. "Aye," he said. "What brings you out here?" Robar asked as he climbed off of Falcon, and the three knights sheathed their swords and sat back down again. "Lord Karstark sent me to find out if you had made some progress," Gendry replied as he sat down, and Patrek passed him a slice of bread, to which Gendry said, "Thank you, Sir Patrek. We have made some progress." "Here, I'll show you," said Lucas before he stood up and showed Gendry the ground beneath the hill, just as Gendry finished his slice of bread. "What do you see?" Lucas asked. Gendry looked out and could see tracks. "Tracks made by horses and men." "Tracks of horses and men," he replied. "Yes. Amongst the tracks, we found a lot of half-eaten food. All of it looked rather fresh. Maybe a day or so. These cowardly shits can't be too far away," Lucas explained as the two returned to Robar and Patrek. "Have you given any thought as to what you'll do when this is all over, Sir Gendry?" asked Patrek. "I'll take what comes. I have no complaint," he replied. "Well, that's good for you. But, for some of us, there is a big question as to what we will do," said Robar. "If King Robb does take the Iron Throne, then I would gladly serve in his Kingsguard," said Lucas. "Really? And hold no lands, have no children and take no wives?" asked Patrek. "Brynden is heir to Raventree Hall. I'm a second son. I've never truly cared for getting married and having children. I never really had the patience for holding court either. What else can I do but travel around Westeros simply to fight in tourneys or wait impatiently for the next war to start or hope to be awarded my own keep?" Lucas explained. I think I'll do the same. I'm a second son also. My younger brother Waymar died a year ago, soon after becoming a ranger in the Night's Watch. And I have no love for how truly cold it gets in the north in winter," said Robar. "Whereas you, Patrek, you're your father's eldest son. You are heir to Seaguard," said Lucas. "Aye, that's so. Just not married yet. And I pray to the Seven that my bride won't be a weasel-faced free, now that nearly all of them have been kicked out of the twins," he said as he rested his back against a tree. They all chuckled before Gendry remembered the most recent news. "Have you heard the news about the king?" Gendry asked. "No, what news is there?" Lucas asked. "He went out to meet my Uncle Renly. Uncle Renly tried to convince him to join with him and to recognize him as the rightful king. But he failed, fucking miserably, before he heard the news that my Uncle Stannis besieged Storm's End, just as Uncle Renly was planning to invade King's Landing. He didn't even leave any army behind to protect Storm's End or the Stormlands," Gendry explained. They laughed until Robar hushed them. "Listen. Can you hear that?" he asked. Gendry listened. "He's right. I can hear an army marching. Horses and men. They put down their food and went down on their knees to crawl to the hill's viewpoint. That's them. The brave companions. They look as though they have just been raiding, whispered Patrek as they could see the front of them march on the road. Gendry could see several flags, all were of the Black Goat of Qohor, the symbol of the brave companions. How many do you reckon? Asked Gendry. Can't be more than Lord Karstark's army, said Lucas. Gendry noticed how several of them left their column to take a piss, do a shit, or even throw stones out of their boots before rejoining their column or going to join another column. What the fuck is wrong with this lot? They have no discipline or structure. And they all wear different clothes and armor, muttered Robar. They're more an army of criminals than professional sellswords or soldiers, said Patrek before the army stopped. Quiet. Quiet. Lucas whispered loudly. The 4 knights waited silently as the march was called to a halt. A man in foreign-looking armor, wearing a goat's head helmet, a necklace of coins and with a long goatee beard rode in front of them. Vargo Hoat, said Lucas. Men. We're not attacking Fupid fucking Villageth now. Now, we march on the Thorpanth. We'll loot and burn the whole fucking city and make it ours. What tie you? And his army cheered. Back to Lord Karstark. Now. Patrek whispered, and the 4 knights crawled away and ran back to their horses and rode as fast as they could back to the Karstark encampment. It had been a few hours until they reached the campsite, a mile in front of the city's main gate. In Lord Karstark's tent, he was talking with Harry about his newly born son, called Alaric, born from his free wife, Bethany. It's your responsibility and Beth's responsibility to teach young Alaric what is expected of him as the future Lord of Karhold. But make sure that Beth doesn't turn him into a Ponzi southerner. Do you understand, Harry? He said to his son and heir, whilst Torrin and Eddard were drinking together and talking about Eddard's romancing with Silver Santiga, heiress to Spotswood in Dawn. My lords, the scouts return, said the guard before Harry could answer his lord father. Gendry, Patrek, Lucas and Robar entered the tent. You have news? Lord Karstark asked. Yes, my lord. They are marching on the Solpants. Now, said Patrek. Lord Karstark immediately called his squire, a free boy called Alistair. Alistair. My sword and armor, now. And then prepare my horse. Yes, my lord, said Alistair from outside the tent. Lord Karstark then asked how far away. Half a day's march from the city. But, on the road there are at least 2 villages standing in their way. They won't leave them standing, my lord, said Lucas. No. No, they won't. How long before they reach the first village? He asked. We won't get there in time, my lord, said Robar, who looked angry as he said it. If only we had found them sooner, we could have stopped them in time before they attacked the first village. The area around the second village, are there any hills or woods? He asked. Yes, my lord. Woods and hills on the western side of the road and a fast-flowing stream that is as wide as a wagon on the eastern side of the road. That road is the only way for them to get into the village, said Patrek. Good. We'll ambush them from the woods as they come towards the village and force them towards the stream so they can't escape. Then he turned to his sons. Prepare the army. We march to the village now, and they all stood up and left the tent. Now, tell me, what make you of their army? No discipline and lazy. Most of them had coins, food, bottles of wine and jewelry spilling out of their pockets and rucksacks. They are more of an army of criminals than an army of sellswords or an army of soldiers, my lord, said Robar. Scum like them prefer to fight unarmed people. They'll find different when they fight us, he said as Alistair Free had finished dressing Lord Karstark in his armor and passed him his sword. They all left the campsite. As they did so, Lord Karstark climbed onto his horse and stood before the army and announced, the cowards we fight today have not spared no small folk at all. Not one child, man, woman or elderly they come across. So, lads, when we fight them, I have just one order. Kill them all. Do not spare one of these cowardly shits, for all the evil they've done. They prefer fighting unarmed small folk, but when they fight us, they'll see how true men fight. They'll see how the Northerners of Karhold fight. Gendry cheered with the Karstark army at the Lord of Karhold before they began the march to the second village. In the front, they had Robar, Patrek and Lucas scouting ahead and ordered by Lord Karstark to keep watch for any of their scouts or outriders. If you find any, kill them to stop them telling their goatish master we're here. The 3 knights took 20 Karstark cavalry with them as they rode ahead. Gendry rode with Lord Karstark and his sons. They arrived at the second village. Lord Karstark shouted for all the local small folk to hear people. I am Lord Rickard Karstark of Karhold, bannerman of King Robb Stark. Now, the brave companions are marching for the Solpants. Your village is in their way. We are here to stop them, but if we fail, you must head to Solpants, where you will be safe. The people all began to hide in their homes or began to flee towards the Solpants. Bring all of our troops into the woods, Lord Karstark told his sons and his commanders. My lord. Look. Gendry said, pointing in the distance at the sky. Several large clouds of black smoke, climbing high into the sky. The first village. What happened there will not happen here. That means that they can't be too far away, said Lord Karstark as he donned his helmet and drew his sword and shield, and all his army started moving into the woods. Patrek, Robar, Lucas and their cavalry arrived just as the army was taking position. Lord Karstark, they are coming. They'll be here within the next 2 hours, said Robar. Excellent. Now, get into position, he said as they climbed down from their horses before he turned to the rest of his army. All right, keep quiet, all of you. Archers fire when I give the order and then we press down onto them and charge at the fucking cowards. Now, keep down and keep quiet. Lord Karstark bellowed for all to hear as all took places in the woods. Gendry had his bow with him, but he only had 3 arrows. He pierced them all into the ground in front of him as he crouched down at the foot of a tall tree, with the Karstark army all around him. Not 2 hours, but 3 hours later, Gendry could hear marching, men's voices and horses riding from the road. There they are. Eddard whispered excitedly, pointing with his spear at the road that they could see from the foliage of the trees. Father, asked Torren as he reached for an arrow. Not yet. We wait until we can see the entire army. I don't want any of these shit-eating cowardly scum to escape, replied Lord Karstark. Gendry, like many others, began reaching for arrows and waited for Lord Karstark's order to knock, whilst others quietly and slowly drew swords, axes and spears. Gendry pulled one of his arrows out of the ground and fixed it to his bow, without knocking it, as he stared at the army of evil cowards, daring to call themselves the Brave Companions. Cowardly cunts is more suitable for these despicable shits. He could see Vargo Hoat riding alongside them and was wearing his goat helmet. Thun, Larth. We'll be in the Thorpanth and fucking every girl and woman there, and all of the silver, gold and gemth will be ours, he shouted as they cheered. Lord Karstark turned to Gendry and asked in a bewildered manner what's wrong with him. I heard he's got a large and swollen tongue, my lord, he explained. Clearly. I'd be laughing at him if I didn't want to kill the monster, he said with a half grin, half grimace. All right, now. Lord Karstark shouted. Gendry knocked his arrow and raised his bow and shot it at the column of brave companions directly below him. His arrow hit one of them in the knee and he fell, screaming. Kill them all. Lord Karstark shouted soon after Gendry fired his other 2 arrows, killing one and wounding another, and Eddard shouted "Yah!" as he threw his spear, impaling a horseman through the neck. Gendry roared as the rest of the army either roared, shouted or yelled, running down the hill. Gendry raised his hammer and shield and ran down the wooded hill towards the enemy. He saw a man armed with an axe in one hand and a sword in his other. He slammed his hammer into his face, caving his skull in to the extent that Gendry could see his brains as he fell to the ground, and dozens of coins fell out of his pockets. He then thrust his hammer into the cock and balls of another, whom was wearing more rings, bracelets and necklaces than any whore or noble lady that Gendry had ever seen. As he groaned and fell to his knees, Gendry slammed his hammer down onto his neck before bashing a third with his shield and then smashing his hammer onto the top of his head. Gendry could see Vargo Hoat. He looked around in shock at the Karstark army carving through his own army like a hot knife through butter, and his second in command was pulled down from his horse and beheaded by Harry on Karstark's large axe. I'm going to kill you, you despicable fucking cunt. The people of the Riverlands will sleep more peacefully when they hear that you're fucking dead, Gendry thought as he smashed his shield across at a man with a sword and spear, knocking him to the ground, only to be stabbed repeatedly by a Karstark spearman. Gendry kicked another out of the way before he smashed his hammer onto Vargo Hoat's foot. He fell off of his horse, screaming. Gendry let him stand up. He saw Gendry and drew his curved, sickle-like sword, called an arrow. You will fucking die today, you shit-eating coward. Gendry shouted as he limped and blocked Gendry's blow with a shield of one of his dead men. Gendry's blow pushed him back before Gendry thrust his shield at Vargo's shield, and then Gendry smashed down onto it, disarming him of his shield. He tried to slice across at Gendry. Gendry blocked his slice with his shield and then smashed his hammer onto his arrow-wielding arm. As he screamed, Gendry thrust his hammer into his cock and balls. He screamed even louder as he fell to his knees. Any last words, goat man? Gendry asked as he raised his hammer. When I see you in the Thevan Health, I will fuck all of your women and make you fucking thuffer, he managed to shout through his grunts. I won't be seeing you in hell, fuckface. Not after all that you've done. Gendry shouted before slamming his hammer into the back of his skull. He fell face down, with blood and brains dribbling down from his skull. As the battle finished, as Lord Karstark had commanded, all of them had been put to the sword. The soldiers of Karhold had suffered only a few dozen wounded casualties. Burn all their bodies and take anything of value of theirs. We return to our campsite by nightfall, and tomorrow we march back to Riverrun, Lord Karstark ordered. All the enemy corpses were burned, and then the army marched back to their campsite. By the time they had reached there, the people of Solpans knew very well of the victory and cheered for them from the walls. It's always nice to see people being grateful to you for something that you do for them. If there's one thing I hate, it's ingratitude, commented Eddard Karstark. I didn't fight them for gratitude, for money, for glory, or for my name to be sung in song. I fought them because it was the right thing to do, Gendry thought as he washed the blood off of himself in a water barrel and Meryn cleaned his armor, shield and hammer. In gratitude for saving his city and his people, Sir Quincy had knighted all three of Lord Karstark's sons and gifted Lord Karstark 50,000 gold dragons. Now that you're knights, you will be getting homeless and weasel-faced free boys as your squires very soon. Gendry joked to Lord Karstark's sons, at which they laughed. I've got a weasel-faced free wife already. I don't want a weasel-faced squire from the same family as well. Harryon added. Beth is pretty, for a free Torren pointed out. Not as pretty as Silver or as skilled in bed, Eddard boasted with a naughty grin. Aye, Beth is pretty. But believes in knights, chivalry and honor, all that southern horse shit, replied Harryon. Whereas Silver has head wrapped around her tits and worshipping her cunt, said Torren. All with a great big smile on my face whilst she worships my cock, said Eddard, at which his brothers laughed at him. They packed up the camp and marched back to Riverrun the next morning. They arrived 10 days after they had left the Solpans. But soon after arriving, Gendry heard troubling news. Uncle Renly is dead. Even though he was not a warrior or a leader or a king, he was still my uncle and the man who legitimized me. For that, I will light a candle in memory of him, one of the few family I have left, Gendry thought as he went to his chambers. Tyrion 12. At the small council, they had heard the news of Renly's death from Lord Varys. Who murdered him? Asked Tyrion. Accounts differ from my little birds, my lord hand. Some said that it was one of his Kingsguard, a woman called Brienne of Tarth, for rejecting her affections, others say it was an assassin of Stannis, a few have said that Stannis himself struck him down in a night attack, but the strangest account was that it was dark magic of his Red Priestess Melisandre, said Varys. Whilst I don't want to believe in this sort of magic, I shouldn't forget that dragons used to exist. I've seen all of their skulls in the cellars of the Red Keep. If Stannis does have this sort of magic at his disposal, what will he do next? And what will Robb Stark do next, now that we know that he refused Renly at Maidencourt? What of his armies? Asked Sir Jacelyn. The Stormlords pledged their allegiance to Stannis. As for the Reach armies, they've all gone home. Loras Tyrell was angrily trying to find Brienne of Tarth before leaving, it has been said, said Varys. His king and lover dead, on his watch as commander of the Rainbow Guard. What will the Tyrells do now? How many does Stannis' army number now? Jaime asked. The Stormlords joined Stannis with 35,000, my lord. Stannis now numbers a little less than 40,000. The Reachmen return home with roughly 75,000, said Varys. Could we try and appeal to Highgarden? Offer Margaery Tyrell's hand to Joffrey. It would replenish our armies and give us a fighting chance against Robb Stark and Stannis, Tyrion suggested. The Tyrell family are descended from jumped-up stewards awarded Highgarden and the Reach by the Targaryens. You want their line to join with the Lannister line. Joffrey can do far better than the whore of Highgarden, Cersei said incredulously, as though House Lannister was a godly house amongst mere mortals. I would do all that we can do to end this war and with Joffrey as our undisputed king. But father can't outfight Stannis and Robb Stark at the same time. Especially now that father's sellsword force pillaging the Riverlands have been destroyed by the Karstarks. What of the Ironborn and the fighting in the north? Davin asked Varys. Roose Bolton was killed by the Ironborn whilst ending their attack on Torrhen's Square. The Ironborn are totally out of the north now that Victorian Greyjoy is dead, also, killed by Benfred Tallheart, my lord. My little birds have been saying that Balon Greyjoy is also dead. Just as the Ironborn were holding a king's moot to elect a new king, Balon's exiled brother, Euron Greyjoy, has returned and has been elected king. And now he is preparing the Iron Fleet of nearly 700 ships to bring a new attack on the north, said Varys. Euron Greyjoy, Tyrion thought as he shared a glance with Jaime and Cersei. They knew him very well. He was a man whom they remembered very well and a man whom was hated by all of Casterly Rock and Lannisport. The Greyjoy rebellion had begun when Euron Greyjoy led a fleet and attacked the Lannister war fleet at Lannisport and burned the entire fleet in port, killing thousands of sailors. I can still hear the sailors screaming as the Greyjoy flames burned the ships and half of the port. Does he still want the North in exchange for an alliance? Asked Cersei. He does, Your Grace. He seems hellbent on making the North suffer for these setbacks and ruining his plans of restoring the Ironborn old way of life as an independent nation, said Varys. Do we have any idea of when they might sail? Asked Davin. It is impossible to say at this point, my lord. They are still keen on building more ships. Robb Stark will doubtless know of what they are doing now. But Theon Greyjoy is proving himself an annoyance. It seems that looting Lannisport hasn't satisfied his lust for raids and spoils. Only recently, he captured a few of Lord Tywin's ships transporting gold to Essos to hire sellsword armies, said Varys. Oh, Theon, you reeking squid shit. Continue with this, and I'll make sure to have you castrated. Do we know of Stannis' next move? Asked Cersei. I think that there's only one logical move for Stannis right now, Your Grace. And that would be to take King's Landing, now that he has the ships next to the soldiers for such an attack on the city. I would say that he would be ready to attack by the end of this moon, said Varys. But we have many plans and lines of defense to protect the city from such attacks, said Tyrion. I'll send a letter to father and update him on my plans of a marriage between King Joffrey and the lovely Rose of Highgarden, said Tyrion, bringing the session of the small council to an end. If Stannis attacks, not only will he kill all in the Red Keep, but he would kill Myrcella and Tommen, who have never done any wrong, other than being born of what my brother and sister share, or shared. I really don't understand why people call Cersei a whore. It's not as if she ever got paid for fucking Jaime. And it was 3 weeks after Renly's killing that Ser Jacelyn's ships had spotted Stannis' fleet fast approaching Blackwater Bay. Tyrion had already sent a letter to father to inform him of Stannis' imminent arrival. Jaime was in command of the garrison and the army, whilst Cersei was demanding 200 soldiers for the sole purpose of guarding her and her children. Both Tyrion and Jaime denied her of her demand. The soldiers' morale will be high if they see their king amongst their numbers, said Jaime when the 3 children of Tywin Lannister met in Robert's Old Solar. No. Joffrey must be safe at the Red Keep. He is the king and must be safe, Cersei demanded as though her word was absolute. Nowhere will be safe when Stannis attacks. If he breaks through, no mercy will be shown. He needs to be seen alongside the soldiers. This is a battle that we cannot escape from, said Jaime. He's right, Cersei. Father would be furious if he found out that our king ran and hid during battle, disgracing his ideal Lannister legacy, said Tyrion. Tyrion stood on the battlements with Jaime, Joffrey and the King's Guard as they could see Stannis' navy sail towards the harbour. And Ser Jacelyn had sent the fireship towards the centre of the bulk of Stannis' ships. Bronn shot a flaming arrow at the ship as it had gotten close to the enemy ships. Don't fucking miss. The arrow hit the fireship and an enormous green flame erupted and evaporating dozens of the front ships and setting the rear ones on fire. That must be at least a quarter of Stannis' fleet, if not more, said Jaime. But the rest will still be able to land, said Joffrey. No, they won't, Your Grace. For if you had bothered to show up to any small council session, you would know that we have already prepared for such a scenario, said Tyrion as he noticed the hound closing his eyes and flinching when he saw the flames. Sir Jacelyn, raise the chain. Jaime ordered. Jacelyn waved a flag to the men in the harbour and an enormous chain was raised at the water, which could well be seen by what was left of Stannis' ships, illuminated by the green fires. What now? Asked Joffrey. Now, your grace, he has no choice but to land his troops further back than he would have hoped, and make his troops easier targets for our archers, explained Jaime. And sure enough, Stannis landed all his remaining ships, and once they reached solid ground, his army disembarked and had begun to charge at the gates, with Stannis leading from the forefront. Fire! Jaime cried out. Archers, crossbowmen and peltastes all begun firing at the oncoming soldiers. Sir Jacelyn, get infantry forming a spear wall at the Mud Gate and the King's Gate. Bronn and Davon, lead the defense of the King's Gate. Jaime ordered Jacelyn before turning to Bronn and Davon. This'll be fucking fun, Bronn muttered before he and Davon sprinted towards the King's Gate. My lord, they're almost at the Mud Gate, shouted Jacelyn. Throw down the wildfire. Tyrion ordered. They only had a few pots of wildfire, 10 at most, to hurl down on 2 Stannis soldiers. But though they were few, the effects were devastating. For every pot that was thrown, at least 20 soldiers were killed and another 10 were on fire. Clegane, with me, said Jaime as he and cousin Lancel drew their swords. The hound drew his sword and ran down the battlements to the gate with Jaime and Lancel and were with the soldiers waiting to fight. Tyrion could see the ram smash through after 10 hits at the gate. Forwards. Come on, lads. Tonight, we protect this city and its people from those who would see it burn and those who would rape the girls and women and slaughter all of the boys and men. This is your city. Not Stannis or his red gods. So come on. With me. Fight not for gold, for glory or for the king. But for your families and your loved ones, that they may see a better day. Jaime shouted. The men cheered and roared long and loud as they charged through to face them head on. But it was during the fighting that Sir Meryn came running from the Red Keep. My Lord Hand. Her Grace, the Queen, demands that His Grace come to the Red Keep. What? Does she realize that there's no hiding from any of the fighting? The men need to see their king amongst them. But, if he does go now, they won't notice with Jaime leading the counterattack. That'll be your decision, Your Grace, bearing in mind of course that the men's morale is strong because you are down here, said Tyrion. If mother needs me, then I must go. Uncle Jaime represents me here on the field of battle, Joffrey said before following Sir Meryn. He left Sir Mandon and Sir Aris stayed with Tyrion until he ordered them to join the fighting alongside Jaime. The hound ran after having to fight a fanatical man whom was on fire until Jaime killed him. And then Tyrion saw Jaime face Stannis Baratheon. Soon after Stannis had cut down Sir Jacelyn and Sir Mandon, though Sir Mandon had managed to wound Stannis in their fight. Sir Aris had been killed when he was backstabbed by a spearman and Sir Balon was shot dead by several archers. Jaime was wounded by an arrow shot at his leg and another arrow shot at his chest, and Tyrion knew that his arm still ached from the bites of Grey Wind. Come on Jaime, kill him and save us all tonight. Both men were exhausted and wounded. Jaime struck at Stannis and Stannis blocked his blow and slammed his shield across Jaime's face. Jaime used his helmet as a shield and Stannis sliced down at him, disarming Jaime of his helmet. Jaime used that as an opportunity to cut down on Stannis's shield repeatedly until he dropped his shield. Stannis sliced across and cut at Jaime's underarm and his exposed rib cage. Jaime screamed and drew a dagger. Stannis punched Jaime's face and stabbed him in the chest before Jaime fell on his knees and was groaning and panting in pain. No, 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 no. Come on Jaime. You can do this, Tyrion thought as he picked up a javelin from a nearly empty javelin rack. Jaime blocked Stannis' blow to cut his head off with his sword before stabbing him in the heart with his dagger. Stannis fell to his knees alongside Jaime before he collapsed to the ground. Jaime, in his wounded state, looked close to following Stannis. Get Sir Jaime inside, Lancel. Tyrion shouted down as he threw a javelin at a soldier coming to finish off Jaime. The javelin impaled him and he collapsed onto his back, the javelin traveling through his stomach as he collapsed. Lancel and another soldier grabbed Jaime and pulled him up as Tyrion shouted Stannis is dead. Killed by Sir Jaime Lannister. You can either fight to the death for a dead king, or you can surrender and hope that his grace, King Joffrey, will be merciful. Shouts of panic that Stannis was dead had spread all around his army. Rather than surrender, what was left of the army of Stannis retreated. The battle was over. King's Landing was saved. They had won. Fucking 7 hells. Tyrion had Jaime taken to Pycelle's chambers, having been recently released, but his position on the small council was not restored. Tyrion walked inside the throne room, to see Cersei with Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen. Is she planning to give them poison? What would father say? Cersei. We've won. Jaime killed Stannis. Tyrion shouted as quickly and as loudly as he could to save Tommen and Myrcella from so cruel a death. Stannis is dead. Cersei asked in shock. Yes, he is. Jaime killed him, said Tyrion. Uncle Jaime, will he be okay, Uncle Tyrion? Myrcella asked. Such a sweet and kind girl, looks so much like her mother but has none of her cruelty. He is wounded, but he is with Grand Maester Pycelle now, my beautiful little one. Let him rest and heal for tonight, he's earned it, said Tyrion. We'll see him tomorrow, Myrcella, said Tommen, as he hugged her. Both looked so relieved that it was all over. Jaime is wounded. How badly? Cersei asked after she sent Myrcella and Tommen to their chambers. Quite badly. Cousin Lancel saved him just after he killed Stannis. Pycelle assures me that he will survive the night, Tyrion explained. Cersei breathed a sigh of relief at hearing this news. This is indeed some great news for both of us, Tyrion thought. What of Stannis' army? Cersei asked. Either dead or have retreated when they saw Stannis be killed on the battlefield. I'll send a raven to father and let him know of our victory, said Tyrion. My victory, imp. It's my victory and I am the king. You'd do well to remember that, said Joffrey arrogantly as he stood pompously as though he was marching through King's Landing like a conquering hero in his head. I would remember that, your grace, if you were there and fighting with your men, said Tyrion. Chapter 33, Chapter 31. Chapter text. Catelyn 12. Stannis is dead. Catelyn asked. Aye, he is, my lady. That's 2 kings who've been killed by Jaime Lannister now. Less than half of Stannis' army is dead and the rest of them are retreating north of King's Landing, said Nestor Royce. There's only one place where they can hope to go, north of King's Landing for safety, said Ed Muir. Yes, they must be planning to join Robb's forces rather than swear fealty to Joffrey. They must be afraid of what he might do to them after what he had done to my husband. What news of Tywine? Asked Robb. We've gotten word from a spy inside Harrenhal, your grace. He's hired sellsword companies from Essos to fight for him. The Golden Company, amongst others, has accepted his offer. They are being transported across the narrow sea as we speak, said Uncle Brynden. Prince Oberyn, in your time in the East, have you come across the Golden Company? Asked Robb. I have, your grace. They are the best and largest sellsword force in the world. They number at the most 20,000, unless Tywine has hired more sellsword companies from Essos. The Golden Company are good fighters and hardy, but they'll never go above and beyond their lord's orders if they think that they will die. They don't care for glory. They only care for money. Defeat them in battle that costs them many men, and they'll surely sail back home, he explained. They'll sail to the Crown Lands, maybe to King's Landing or to Duskendale, where they have safe grounds to sail to and easy access to the land and not too far from a march to join Tywine at Harrenhal, said Harold, looking at a map of Westeros, whilst tracing his finger across the directions as he spoke. Have we had any ravens from the coastal fleets or ports of the Vale as to the number of their ships? Uncle Brynden asked. None yet, but I have dispatched ravens to Lady Waynwood to be on watch for such a thing, Sir Brynden, said Nestor Royce. There was a knock on the door. Enter, said Robb. Apologies, your grace, but there's a man here called Sandor Clegane who claims to have Princess Arya, said Sir Robin Roger, the captain of House Tully's household guards. Arya. She's safe. Unless this is some trick of the Hound, Catelyn thought as she and Robb stood up and ran out of the keep. They ran to the courtyard, where a dozen Tully and Stark guards had their swords drawn at a very tall man with hideous burn scars covering most of his face. His armor looked half broken, cut up and covered in blood as though he had fought in a battle and hadn't taken it to a blacksmith for repairs or have it cleaned. And standing next to him, at first glance appeared to be a little boy, with a large direwolf next to him. Caitlin immediately recognized the child, for it was no boy. Arya. It is Arya. She's here and she's safe. Arya, she called. Mother, she said, and she ran to Caitlin. She cried as she hugged Arya tightly, and Robb came and hugged his little sister before turning to Sandor Clegane. Sandor Clegane. I thank you for bringing Arya here. But, why are you here? From what I heard, you were a member of Joffrey's Kingsguard, said Robb. I was. Not anymore. Was fucking fed up of the little blonde Lannister inbred shitpiece and that fucking city. I came across Arya just north of King's Landing at Rosby, he replied. Charming, just as I remember. Robb doesn't seem to mind his lack of courtesy or manners, Caitlin thought as she let go of Arya and looked down at her youngest daughter. Did he hurt you, Arya? Caitlin asked her daughter. Before she could make a reply, the hound burst out laughing. I wouldn't dare. She's tougher and deadlier than she looks. I'll never stand in her way, he said. I'm fine, mother. He never hurt me. He saved me from a bunch of retreating soldiers from Stannis' army. I killed 2, but then he killed the others, she replied. Arya has killed. How? I know that Ned always said that she had the wolf blood, but this is extraordinary. Come inside, Arya. You too, Clegane. You both must be hungry, said Robb. I'm famished, said the hound impatiently. In the dining hall, the hound gorged his way through chicken, fish, sausages, bacon and lamb, as well as drinking wine and ale. All whilst Arya told Caitlin and Robb what happened. My dancing master, a Braavosi called Syrio Forel, saved me from Lannister soldiers and a cruel Kingsguard, Meryn Trant. Nymeria and I escaped, and I saw what they did to father. She paused, turning red, and her eyes moistened when she said it. Poor Arya, a girl still in her teens should never see such things, especially what happened to her father, Caitlin thought as she held Arya. It's okay, Arya. It's all over now. Arya nodded before continuing. I saw a man about to be murdered by 2 gold cloaks. I was still angry after what happened to father, especially when I heard gold cloaks boast about how easy it was to kill father's men. So, I killed one and Nymeria killed the other. He told me that we needed to escape from the city. He took me to the harbor and said his name was Jaqen Hgar of Lorath. He thanked me for saving him, and I asked where he was going, and he said Braavos. I said that Syrio was from Braavos, and he told me of the faceless men of Braavos. He then offered me to come with him. Seeing no other way out of King's Landing, I went with him. What happened in Braavos? Robb asked. He took me to a temple and trained me to be a faceless man. I trained in all this time whilst you were fighting this war. I got a ship to King's Landing with Nymeria, just before Stannis attacked. We left the city and we were heading north in a cart when we were stopped by a bunch of retreating soldiers. I killed 2, but there were 4 others, and one was about to throw a spear at me before the hound killed them. He recognized me from Winterfell and my time in King's Landing when father was Hand of the King. She must be jesting. Surely. The faceless men of Braavos, they don't exist. Best if she rests now and she can tell me the truth when she feels ready to tell me. It was after Robb patted her on the back that he said, "You've done well, Arya. Father would be proud of how well you survived with Nymeria, and now that you're reunited with your pack." He then walked to the hound and said, "Clegane, for saving my sister's life and safely bringing her here, what would you ask of me as a reward?" The hound put down his drink and his half-eaten chicken leg and said, "First of all, a blacksmith to repair my armor. Second, a reward in gold dragons." Robb nodded and then asked, "Is there a third?" A house in Riverrun would be nice." "Nothing big like a keep or a castle, just a nice house," he replied modestly. "Of course," said Robb before saying, "Come, I'll take you to the castle blacksmith." As he stood up, Arya turned to him and said, "Sandor." He turned to face her, he looked surprised. He's probably been called Dog, Hound and Clegane his whole life that he's unfamiliar with people calling him by his actual name, Caitlin realized. "Thank you, for saving me and bringing me to my family," she said before she gave him a hug. Caitlin saw that he blushed as she hugged him, as though he was used to people being cruel to him and that for the first time in a long time, someone was being kind and grateful to him. He patted her on the shoulder and shyly said, I'm glad to, little wolf. Rob rewarded Sander Clegane with a house near to a local blacksmith, 1,000 gold dragons, and his armor had been repaired as promised. He took up a job as a master-at-arms for Riverrun after Ed Muir offered it to him, after the previous incumbent had retired of old age. Arya asked Caitlin at dinner what will happen once the war is over. Well, I was thinking of marrying you off to a lord's son, Caitlin started. Seven hells, no, Arya immediately replied. Caitlin chuckled and said, Gods, how I've missed you, Arya. No, I see now that you would be an unsuitable wife for a lord. So, whatever thing you want to do, I won't stop you, and neither will Rob. Rob left soon after dinner and rode to meet with the remnants of Stannis' army at Maidenpool. As he left, Caitlin introduced Arya to Arianne. Your Grace,